and you, and you. Dude. How you guys all doing today? We've done it. We're here. We're here. We're queer. We don't want any more bears. That's a really awkward thing to say to someone who's never heard the Simpsons reference. If you've never heard that Simpsons reference before, it's very strange to have somebody do that to you. And then you've got to explain the reference, and then they're looking at you like you're like it's okay, it's the Simpsons. It's a very millennial kind of a thing. So yeah, it's a. How are you all doing? I hope you're all doing really well. I am exhausted, just like you are probably, from the system of capital. I'm proud of myself, though. I'm proud of myself because over the last few days, I went and got to the gym. Went to the gym. Look at me, being strong and powerful. I'm going to get all Fabio. I'm going to be like, ripped Fabio. Oh, my shoulders are so in the worst pain ever. But we're here. We've made it. I've got this beautiful chart up today. Life expectancy from birth in Russia from 1845 to 2020. It's got a little box for the Stalinist era, and it's literally like just low. Then World War II happens, and of course it's like fluctuating, like the Soviets come in and it starts to fluctuate upwards, right? World War II happens, the whole thing craters. Then post-World War II, right to the moon. Right, living standards, or life expectancy, I should say, in Russia, post-Soviet Union, literally doubled. Over doubled, right? So it's just one of those things where I struggle with people when they come in and they say, when does communism ever work? Communism's never worked once. Tell me a time when communism's worked. So like if you were a peasant living in World War II, or living in the Soviet Union, right? Your life expectancy literally went up. You went from basically dying at 40 to dying at 80. Like I don't know what to tell you. You know, I don't know what to tell you. I feel like that's a major, massive success. Joe, how you doing? You look different. Yeah, I went and got a haircut. This right here, this is what's done it. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced about this. I cut the hair on the lip so that I could actually eat and not eat my mustache and all that kind of stuff. It definitely makes me look less wizardly. That's the problem. It makes me look less wizardly, and I rather liked looking wizardly. Now it looks fine. Like it looks fine, but like and it works. Like when I eat, I'm not eating my mustache. That's nice. So now it's a decision. Now I've got to decide, do I grow it back out? Do I go back to the wizard look? Or do I want or do I want the wizard, do I want the wizard look or do I want to eat? Yeah, I'm still getting used to it myself. I like the other look better. I did. Like I liked the other look better, but this is fine, you know? So, yeah, that's kind of how it feels, that guy. Like, am I Samson that got my hair cut? Have I lost the source of my strength? I don't think so. Gabriel, good to see you. Eggs D, good to see you. Good to see you. And that guy, good to see you guys. Good to see you guys. I'm still recovering from last weekend. I'm still recovering from the ridiculousness of what happened. And I'm trying really hard to stay healthy, stay strong. I got to the gym over these last couple of days, right? We have a fellow on TikTok with the classic. We got to get this out of the discourse because it's just so childish, right? Just move to North Korea. Do you think maybe there are hurdles to doing that, friend? Do you think that maybe there's hurdles to doing that? Do you think maybe there are problems with doing that kind of a thing, right? Do you think maybe we could sit down and rationally think, what might prevent a person from moving to North Korea, right? It's just such a bad take. And it's sort of ridiculous that people expect a genuine commentary on it. It's like the people who are like, get a job in the middle of a recession while the economy's collapsing. Just get a job. It's fine. Everybody can do it. It's fine. I know it doesn't pay the rent, but it's still, get a job. Like, it's just kind of a brain dead take, frankly. Speaking of brain dead takes, from the Toronto Star, Budget 2024, a majority of Canadians think the Trudeau government is spending too much, poll finds. Like, 3 in 5 Canadians think the federal government is overspending and that the budget cuts are in order, according to the new Angus Reid Institution poll. This is a major win for Capital, right? The goal of Capital is to keep people's minds caught in the religious ideology, right? Is to make sure that when people think economics, they don't think of economics and they don't think of math or science or anything tangible or real, that they think of their religious ideology that they put forward, where money is a physical object that is a real thing that exists in the world, and that matters more than buildings, clean water, energy systems. You know, that money is the purpose of what it is we're doing, and certainly isn't just something that gets fabricated and manufactured and not manufactured, but just like created out of thin air on the behalf of governments in order to actually do these legitimate things, in order to mobilize labor, in order to move people in directions, in order to build institutions and systems, you know, the things that actually matter. So it's a massive major win from the system of capital to get people convinced that fake little pieces of paper or digits on a screen matter more than your ability to secure food or shelter, right? Has a new bookshelf over on Twitch. Good to see you. Haley, good to see you. Yeah, wait until they find out that national debt is completely meaningless. It's all made up. Yep. The only people who actually care about it are financiers, right? So the psychopath class. People who genuinely are fine with committing genocide and massacring people and murdering people and sending people into prisons and all that kind of stuff so that they can get just fake little dollars on a screen somewhere, right? Which then they turn around and use to buy Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island or something like that. So so the idea that 3 in 5 Canadians think the federal government is overspending, major win for the system of capital. Like, it really shows you how far behind our culture is in regards to understanding how any of these systems actually work and who is actually benefiting from any of this kind of stuff. We've got Luke on TikTok just basically being a Nazi, right? Like, just kind of baby brained. That's okay. Right? We all grow up. Just try not to, round people up while you do it. Eric, good evening to you, my friend. I'm so sick and tired of fascists trying to argue that food and shelter isn't a human right because you're not entitled to other people's labor. Yeah, well, at the same time, no one deserves a living wage, and to crown it off, they argue that labor doesn't add value. It only adds price. Yeah, I mean, they're fascists, right? Like, they don't care about human life. Like, they don't care. Right, it pays to remember, Eric, that the only reason fascists only debate for one of two reasons, right? They only debate for one of two reasons. Reason one, they're trying to terrorize you, right? That they want to threaten you with starvation. They want to threaten you with these things because they're fascists, right? That they want you to be scared so that you'll submit. That's what fascists do. Right? Like, they don't genuinely believe in anything, right? They all they believe is power is correct. That's the only thing a fascist actually believes, is that strength equals correct. So find the big strong man and submit to him. And if you won't submit to him, then we will work on behalf of the big strong man to submit to him. Like, it's a really, like, fascists are really weak-minded, right? Are really kind of pathetic in the way that they think about the world, because they basically are looking to subserviate themselves to a strong man. Like, that's the core of fascism, right? Ooh, there's a big strong guy with lots of power. Let's bend the knee to him. And everything he says is correct and right. So it's like daddy worship in a way. Like, it's really sad and small-minded and little. And so the only reason these types of people are even talking to you in the first place, and why they scream their head off about free speech constantly, is so that they can terrorize you. so that they can terrorize you with threats of starvation, so that they can terrorize you with threats of homelessness, while simultaneously trying to argue that you're weak and pathetic and little, and that if you can't secure these things for yourself, it's because you're weak and not because the system of capital is withholding it from you, right? So that's number one, that fascists are not talking from a position of good faith. They never can, they never will, because their position is so weak and sad. And then the second reason why fascists are talking is to recruit other fascists. That's sort of the goal, is to shine a light up into the atmosphere and say, hey, fascists are here, organize with fascists here. So it's yeah, I mean, that guy says, I'm noticing the star moving further right of center. The whole society is moving further right of center. There's no leftists. Like I'm probably the furthest to the left that you're going to find. And these last few months have been very revealing about, like, the quote-unquote leftists on the internet are basically just taking their masks off and telling everybody we're Nazis, right? Or Yahtzees, I should say, so that I don't get banned off these platforms. Like, if you are supporting a genocide in a place that you can't find on a map, then you're not a leftist, right? And we're seeing that all of these people who are supposedly called the left in the last few months have just really revealed themselves to essentially be hardcore far-right Yahtzees, right? That their whole ideology is rooted in Zionism and in Nazism, right? That their whole position is hard-rooted in these far-right ideological positions. Just a couple of them think everybody should have health care because it makes sense, right? To erect a universal healthcare system. Like, but that doesn't make them a leftist. Like, it's just this, and of course the system of capital is doing everything it can to convince us that the worst thing going on in our lives is the reduction in productivity, right? From the Financial Post, Canada's productivity woes going from bad to worst, warn economists, people like probably from the Fraser Institute. We're going to find out. Canada's productivity problem has gone from bad to worse, a panel of economists told a conference on Tuesday, Thursday. It turns out that if you raise everybody's rent, destroy everybody's ability to actually purchase a home or to have a home, they'll stop working so hard, right? Yeah, really, we've got all these homeless people. We've got all this poverty being spread throughout our society. And a small handful of psychopaths have raised prices on everybody and is jacking everybody's rent. And productivity keeps going down. I wonder what it could be, right? I wonder what it could be. Yeah, Haley basically nailing it when it comes to fascism. If I look the boot hard enough, they won't step on me. Yeah, they think they're part of the club. Yeah, exactly. Over an 8-year period, Canada has never seen slower labor productivity growth, said Trevor Toome, an economics professor at the University of Calgary, during the annual Canada Growth Summit. The scale of the challenge, the speed of it worsening, and the importance of addressing it are now bigger than in most of our lifetimes. Yeah, but the ideas that these guys are going to come up with are going to be things like shock collars. Right? It's all going to be punitive. It's all going to be like, we should raise taxes on these people and incentivize them to action. Right? That's what we'll do. If we make everything terrible for these guys, they'll be incentivized to work harder out of a sense for their own stability. Yeah, we need to terrorize people more. That's what we need to do. That's the ideas that these guys are going to come up with. Methane, good to see you. Yeah. What ludicrous propaganda. Also that when conservatives take power, people will be prepared for the massive cuts to important things like social programs. So obvious. Yeah. Tax and spend liberals. Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's a useful narrative, right? It's a useful narrative to keep people caught in the back and forth between the good cop, bad cop, right? The good cop, bad cop dynamic, which is make sure, like, the liberals get into power and they improve things by 0.2% over 10 years, right? And then the conservatives get in and cut everything. And as long as you believe that money is real, then this is a thing that you can get caught up in. And nobody actually points out, like, hey, maybe what we've done with that money is what matters. Maybe what we've actually done is what actually matters. That, like, the accounting on the other end of it is, like, kind of superfluous based on like what it is you've done. And it's important to remember that the reason why these religious acolytes use like bad measurements like GDP for everything is because GDP is easy to manipulate, and it's easy to show that like, oh wow, everything's going so good because GDP has gone up. Meanwhile, like there are all kinds of examples that if GDP goes up, like if everybody is getting their water from a lake, right? GDP is zero. But if you poison the lake and then create systems to clean the water and then withhold the clean water from everybody unless they pay you, well then GDP goes up. Better system, better thing that you've done, well GDP went up. One guy is able to exploit other people's need for water, right, by withholding water from a supply that he himself likely poisoned. GDP went up. This is a good way to measure things, right? Certainly we shouldn't be measuring things based on people's like basic quality of life, their ability to access food, their ability to access shelter, their ability to live freely in the world that they live. No, what matters is that 5 guys got lots of money exploiting everybody. That's what really matters. And capitalism maintains a parasite class. They are non-working and produce nothing. And then they want to complain when workers don't produce enough to support them? Yeah. Like, yeah. Isaac writes, people immigrating to Canada leave as soon as they find out how much the rent and cost of living. I did a tax. I'm going to say that that's for a girl from Europe. And she told me she was leaving when she found out how much tax she has to pay. Yeah. No, like, there's no reason. If you're living in Europe, there's no reason to come to Canada. Like the benefits that you have in a place like France are way, way, way better than what you get in Canada, for sure. Yeah. We just spent 30 billions on planes. Yeah. The shifting of the Overton window to the right kicked in under Reagan. It's inhuman, contemptible. Surely we can do better. Yeah, of course we can do better. Like, it's just about whether or not we're actually going to put 2 and 2 together on this one. I think the biggest issue that I see in the society today is that the people who are getting shit kicked, i.e. the majority of workers, are just too nice. Like, they're just too nice. Like, we're dealing with a psychopath class that has become completely unhinged. And that psychopath class that's completely unhinged is doing everything it can to maintain its system of power. And it's definitely going to fund far-right groups, and it's definitely going to fund far-right organizations to take over and to act as though they're leftists in order to destroy leftist movements. Like, they're going to do all this stuff, and how do we know? Because they've done it in the past, right? And like, it's so clear that we are descending into a form of Nazism. Like, it's really, really obvious. The genocide in Gaza alone should be the thing that should convince you. Well, a big thing, Joe, and what I'm talking about more and more, like, as we move into action and as we move towards strikes and as we move into bigger protests and as we move into that direction, which is happening, okay? Like, I'm not a doom and gloomer. I think that there are people who are moving the needle and who are taking to the streets, and there are strike actions happening. The quiet quitting movement alone is moving in that direction. But we as people need to change our mindset. And how we need to change our mindset is away from concessions bargaining towards simply taking things over. That what is happening now, and I see this over and over and over again when I talk to people, is that they think that we're going to negotiate our way out of this. And we're not. We're not going to be able to negotiate with these people. And the more energy we put into negotiation and the more energy we put towards, like, let's get a guy in there and then he'll talk to them and then we'll all talk and we'll talk back and forth. The longer that goes on, the worse this whole thing is going to get. We're past that. We're past the point of no return here. Like, you can't negotiate with Darth Vader, right? You can't negotiate with Voldemort. You can't negotiate with these guys. And yet thousands and thousands and thousands of us still think that we can just negotiate our way out of it. And until that mindset changes, until that mindset flips, right? Like you can focus on electoral politics if you like. I'm of the opinion it's a dead end, but I understand why people think that it can go down there. But if you're voting for people who are saying anything other than the psychopath class needs to be eliminated from the discourse, Workplaces need to be transferred over to their workers. Renters need to own the units that they're in. The psychopath class, including landlords, including capital owners, need to be gone from the conversation completely and taxed out of existence. And if the people who you are voting for and are supporting are saying anything less than that, then it's a failure. Because a negotiation with the psychopath class begins with the idea that they have a right to be there at all, that they have a right to hold on to the means of production, that they have a right to be slumlord landlords, that they have a right to any of this kind of stuff, when they've proven beyond the shadow of a doubt that they don't have a right. They have no right whatsoever to have access to the means of production. Like, Galen Weston has absolutely no right to have access to the food distribution chain or to be a decision maker of any sort. The fossil fuel industry executives have no right whatsoever to have any decision-making power in our society at all, but outside of the one vote that they get in the electoral system. We should raise taxes on people who make money over $1 million to 100%, including corporate power. We should nationalize the food distribution chain. We should nationalize the energy system. We should nationalize the power grid. We should nationalize literally every single thing and pull it out of the public, out of the private hands completely, because they've shown that they're psychopaths and they're not interested in negotiating, and they're not interested in being rational, and they're not interested in making good choices, right? That the only reason they're negotiating is to waste your time and hope that you'll only accept a 0.2% increase over 20 years while they absolutely decimate the country. Like, we have to get it into our minds and in our heads that we are dealing with psychopaths, that they will not negotiate in good faith. They will destroy the country. They will do it, right? And if you can create a secondary system, Long Defiant, that's fine. But, like, anything to wrest power out of the hands of these psychopaths, right? Anything. Because they're obviously failures. Like, they're obviously failures. It's so overwhelmingly the case that these people are overwhelming total failures. Like, we have the UN climate chief. This is the UN climate chief. We have 2 years to save the world from climate crisis. Like, the system of private capital is a complete and total failure at every single level. The only people who defend it at this point are fascists, because they are so small-minded and short-sighted that they don't understand that they are going to get destroyed by this system as well. And of course, there's a small handful of them that kind of are looking forward to a purge moment so they can start murdering innocent people, right? Like, that's obviously the case. For the rest of us, we should definitely not be talking about this as if it's like, what we need to do is move into a society where there's a just better, more equitable distribution, and we still have capitalists. That's a failed idea right from the start. Right from the start, and we got to get to it. Like, we got to get to that place, and we're not there. We're not even close. Adam35515 on Twitch. What do you think about the two-state solution? I think it's a good idea. I don't think it can happen anymore. I think that the time for that to happen has actually passed. I would support it. Like, if suddenly the Palestinians and the Israelis were to both stand up and be like, okay, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. We're going to support it. We're going to move towards it. We're going to do everything we can. But I think that Israel sort of tipped their hand. Right, I think Israel has tipped their hand and has really shown that they are not interested in that, and that there is no configuration in which that is going to be possible. I think the Israelis have made it very clear that they are what I like to call Zio-Nazis, right? They're always going to be seeking extermination of Palestinians, and once the Palestinians are gone, they'll turn it on the Lebanese or the Jordanians or something. Right, they're a genocidal people and they're a genocidal force, and they'll continue moving in that direction. Like, so I just don't see how a two-state solution is possible. Again, if suddenly the Israelis were to go, oh, wait a minute, we're fucking acting like crazy Nazis, and maybe we should stop, sure. But they're not going to do that. So. If you have a dependable supply of food and you have your community and you've neutralized their power and you didn't have to go through the government, as soon as Chavez nationalized all the Venezuelan industry, poverty fell 28% until Obama input draconian sanctions to destroy their economy. Yeah, that's the problem, right? is having energy independence, right? That because the system of capital is not just going to let you do these things. Like, they're going to do everything they can to punish you for it. And a big problem that we have here in Canada is that the United States, the largest fascist organization on the planet, is we're a vassal to them, and there's very little that we can do about it. So it is like, create parallel systems, support people who are actually seeking genuine overthrow. Patrick Bateman. Well, sir, Mr. Bateman. Oh, well, it's a pleasure to see you. Please do not kill me. It's so depressing being in a deep red Bible Belt state and hearing the climate deniers running rampant. Yeah. Like, it's flat earther shit. Like, I am of the opinion, I'm quite sympathetic to individuals, because I think people are fairly susceptible to conspiracy theory, and especially if you're like a Bible thumper, right? You thump the Bible so hard that you can't be bothered to open it up or read it. It's easy to convince you that things are like, if you can believe that Jesus Christ is coming back at any moment, and you genuinely believe that that's the truth, then you can believe anything, right? And and you're not really basing what you're saying on evidence in the first place, right? So if you're not rooting your opinions and the way you view the world on evidence, if that's not the heart of where you begin your observation of the genuine world, then you can believe whatever you like, right? And evidence doesn't matter to you. So I think that this is like an intellectual level on the same level as just like a chimp or a monkey, right? So these guys haven't actually gotten to a point where they're in their thinking brain at all. Like, they don't actually have thoughts outside of just like, right? It takes a lot of effort to get people into their heads. And there's a lot of effort being done to spread around propaganda, to spread around misinformation. This is why I argue that the climate change, like the people who spread climate change denialism into the society, ExxonMobil, Shell, BP, like, these people should be rounded up and arrested. We should put them on trial for like war crimes. Like, that's the scale that we should be treating these people, because they've very, very clearly lied to us. And it's very, very obvious. And they've really roped in a lot of, gullible type people. And a ton of those exist in America, right? A ton of those people exist in America. But it's going to get obvious, right? It's just going to get really obvious that climate change is a real thing. Like, it's already obvious to anybody with a brain. But if you're one of these people who kind of believe that Jesus Christ is coming back at any moment, you think that, like, the solar eclipse matters more than, the rain cycle. You think that aliens are coming down or whatever. There's like a Hellgate portal or something going to open up. Then yeah, you can be roped into this shit. And we should not be focused on the gullible people who get roped into this shit, because those people are victims too. We should be focused on the people who knew what they were doing, who actively lied to people, who stirred up this discontent in the first place, and those people should be incarcerated, without a doubt. Those people are obviously criminals of the highest order, but we don't have a good track record of punishing our political criminals. Yeah, just a specific kind of organization, long decentralized versus centralization. Makes sense to do some kind of hybrid with efficiency in mind. I always, look, I don't get stuck on this stuff. Like, I'm not a Puritan and I'm not a fundamentalist. Like, every little bit counts. Every little bit counts, right? Rhodus the Creator. It's a pretty epic name, my friend. Rhodus the Creator. I think this is your first comment, my man. Good to see you. What do you think about privates? Private schools, private hospitals, those type of services paid with vouchers. Everyone would have access to it like Publix, but the quality would be much better. No, there's no evidence to show that that's the case. That's an extremist position, right? We have all of the evidence to show in the world, literally like 50 countries having publicly owned hospitals, publicly run schools. Like, we've got massive, overwhelming evidence to show you that public school systems that are actually funded, that actually receive support from the society, are cheaper to run, are better for the society, are easier to interact with, are easier to work with. The obvious one is the private healthcare system in the United States. Like, the private healthcare system in the United States is a failure. Just like a black and white, naked, right in front of your face, total collapsing directly in front of you, utter failure. To try to argue in favor of privatization at this point is like shooting yourself in the head and saying that you got more smart. Like, no, you didn't. You're committing self-suicide, and you're defending a failed system that does not work at all. And it's an extremist view to try to make the argument that it will. It's highly experimental. It's never shown results ever in the history of mankind. It's never once shown anything other than total failure, the erection of class systems, the impoverishment of the society, spreading nothing but fear and desperation wherever it goes, and there isn't a shred of evidence to show otherwise. So my comment to you would be, if you think that your hunch, your extremist, far-right, ridiculous, unproven position that comes out of libertarian kooky losers has any bearing whatsoever, any standing whatsoever, show a shred of evidence to the case. Because we have overwhelming evidence to show that public systems are better, faster, more efficient, and work. And the only time they don't is when privatization hawks defund them. So that they can go, well, the public sector doesn't work after we defunded it 30, 40, 50% over 10 years. Yep, doesn't work. Guess we'll have to privatize. And then a bunch of gullible rubes who don't think climate change is real and the earth is flat go, yeah, that's absolutely correct. Yeah, the system's not working. Private sector is more efficient. Yes, it is, because the big strong guy said so. Like, don't be a dummy. Like, there's no evidence for your claim at all. 0%. While there's just unbelievable, overwhelming evidence to show that the opposite is true. So just abandon this ridiculous position, because there's just nothing there. Eric writes, honestly, the whole discussion of climate change just proves how we need a systemic change, and we don't have the political will to do it, because it is authoritarian. Did I read the Venezuela article I posted in the Discord? I didn't have the time, bud. Oh, we're getting some new people in here. That's good. Give me the odds. What are the chances we actually address climate change through revolution, reform? I think it's pretty small. I'm preparing to survive the worst. Yeah, I mean, look, even if we stop polluting, the factoid that I know about this that has really got my hackles up, and that should also get you into a concerned space, I think, is that we are absolutely going to face major climate change consequences. Like, major. If we stopped polluting today, if we turned all of the coal factories off, if we told all the coal plants off, if our emissions went to 0 today, we're going to hit 4 degrees extra heating by 2100. And all the signs are showing that we're accelerating. So my suggestion to everyone is start growing your own garden, right? Take it seriously. Start growing your own garden. Start talking to your neighbors. Start building mutual aid systems. Start building your communities now, because that's all you're going to actually have at the end of it all, right? You're not going to have these big global systems. You're not going to have big federated bodies. You're not going to have any of those. Like, there might be a big federated body, but it'll be like a totalitarian dictatorship spreading nothing but tyranny wherever it goes, right? It's not going to be interested in helping you at all. 0%. And if the bureaucrats and the military force shows up and you're looking at them, they're going to be indistinguishable from stormtroopers. Like, we're looking at a rise of massive fascism, right? Like, it's just going to be massive, and it's going to be swift, and it's going to be ridiculous. The groundwork is already placed for us. And so, like, if the federal government, if they show up and you're looking at them, they're only there to take something from you. They're not interested in helping you, and they've made that very clear. And over time, these federated bodies will lose power and authority because people will stop joining them, because people will begin to realize, like, oh yeah, I don't want to be a Nazi. I don't want to be a stormtrooper. I want to actually live in a stable society where people are happy, right? That's the arc of civilization right there. And so as this civilization dies, if you ever wanted to call it a civilization, a new one will be built up around it. And it'll take a couple hundred years, But, that's the nature of it. Conton, good to see you. When I think about it, Christianity is blasphemous as hell. Imagine being so preoccupied for the return of Jesus that you support climate catastrophe to force the hand of God. I know, yeah. To force the hand of God. That's really what it is, eh? Like, it's just like these guys are basically saying, we'll make God show up. Paul the Eggman writes, bring me the spark in my veins. Give me the freedom to chase us. I have no idea what you're talking about, Paul, but sounds like you're reaching for a metal place. Yeah, according to their book, God put humanity on the earth to be a steward of it. Instead, we try to destroy it to force God to show itself. Yeah. Well, it's not the only thing that these guys are like they don't read this book, dude. Like it's really, really obvious that they don't read this book. Like, all you have to do, like, if you want to know more than any modern Christian, right? Like 95% of the people who call themselves Christian, if you want to know more about their faith than they do, read one of the books. Not all the book. You don't need to sit down and be Genesis 1:1 in the beginning, right? You don't need to do that. You need to pick Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John and read one. Read one of them. You read Matthew if you want to read like a diary of a tax collector. You read Mark if you want to read campfire stories told to a scribe by Peter. You read Luke if you want to read a historian coming in and hearing the stories afterwards. And you read John if you want to read a series of love letters written by the apostle Jesus loved. Like, pick one. Read it. Congratulations, you know more than 95% of Christians. Because Christians are widely illiterate. They do not read their own texts. They're like a weird, kooky little incel club that's just like all they care about is being on the in-group. And they don't believe in their Christ. In fact, I say they despise their Christ. I think that modern-day Christians loathe Christ and hate him to his very core. And so this idea that these people who are walking around call themselves Christians while despising their Christ is pretty wild. So I'll reaffirm it. You want to know literally more than any other Christian out there? Pick one book of the Bible and read it. Congratulations, you know more. Patrick Bateman writes, even if it performed worse, who cares? In economics, we know that it's inelastic. I can't choose to not go to the hospital or receive an education. Yeah. Like it's I don't know. It's mind-blowing to see people still arguing in favor of privatization when it's like overwhelmingly a failure. Like, but it's the same people who say that communism is a failure in spite of all the evidence to the contrary. So, we're pretty easy. We're pretty gullible. Lanita writes, I like the book of Ezekiel. All those giant wheels with eyeballs. They must have been high as kites writing that one. Yeah. Yet there are fundies in the U.S. who have actually started complaining that Jesus is too woke. Yeah, like these people are despicable, right? Like they're despicable. They hate their own Christ. It's pretty clear. It's the Christians who read the Bible and still believe it who are the ones who are too far gone. Well, I mean, look, Patrick, I used to be a fundamentalist Christian, right? In my youth, I was a fundamentalist Christian, and I think that's fine if you're like a teenager or whatever, but eventually you've got to recognize and realize like it's magic. There's magic in your book, right? There's magic in there, right? Don't you think this is probably a metaphor? Don't you think they're speaking in metaphor? Don't you think that like chances are good this is a work of fiction in order to teach you and learn you about life during that period of time, but in a cool way, right? Like, It'd be like somebody trying to convince me that the Harry Potter series is real, right? Like, and I'm not shitting on fiction. I think that fiction is a useful, worthwhile thing. And in fact, if you read the Bible from that perspective, there's a lot of power there. And it says a lot about the society that people were living in during that period of time, and a lot about humanity as well. But you're not going to convince me that, like, Christ literally died and rose again. Like, that's not a real thing. But you can definitely convince me that, like, that it has a literary meaning. That, like, Christ, a good man, was killed by the state for upholding the law, and then resurrected with the very clear intention to say, you can kill me, but you can't kill the message, right? That the message will persist. And that's exactly what happened with Christianity. So it's like, I feel like the modern day Christians are just kooks. They're just like become this like weird little lunatic fringe. He's a brown man who worked with his hands. Of course people hate him. There are many ways to disconnect from capitalism. For interest, what if your community had its own security force? No need for peace. Radical? Maybe. But if you have a high trust community, it's fine. Yeah, I think a lot, like you're hitting on something here, not necessarily the security aspect of it, but definitely like it's about community building at this point. It really is. It's about like local community building. Like I understand why you guys are coming in here. I understand why you're coming in here and listening to me. I understand why you're seeking out. I understand why you're doing that kind of thing. Like I get it, right? This is not enough. This is a great place to come in solidarity. This is a great place to air your grievances and celebrate your successes. This is a good place to find a sympathetic ear who is on the left, who genuinely believes that humanity can advance past fascism and past capitalism. I understand why people come here, but I am going to tell you the real power is going to be in building neighborhood community. That building community on your street, in your building, locally, right? And you're not going to be able to do it anywhere else or any way else. And it's going to be the most effective thing for us to do as people, right? And I know that that's tough because we're in this destroyed society and we're in this highly alienated and highly disconnected and highly dislocated society. But that's truly the idea that we need to be moving towards. And every tiny little bit helps. Every itsy little bit helps at this stage in the game. There is no wrong decision. Like if you're looking around in your neighborhood and you're thinking this is what I need to do in order to make this happen, then you're right. Like you should trust your instincts. You shouldn't be asking permission. You should just be doing these things, because if you try to ask permission from this failed system, they'll obviously tell you no, because their goal is to keep you poor and desperate and alienated. That's their goal. So we've got to stop pretending like we live in a system that actually functions or exists in a real or serious way, because we don't. Like we don't. Not really. That's what Christ did in the parables. Yet usage of fiction and analogy. That's a good observation, Timothy. Like within the Bible itself, Christ is doing the very thing that the Bible actually is, right? That Christ is using parables and using stories, and very effective, right? And these parables are works of fiction, stories in order to illustrate a point, and so it makes total sense that. It makes total sense that we would do the same, right? There we go. It makes the sense. So it's like super meta. It's like the story's in the story, right? I love that. Paul the Eggman continues, God was crucified and people thought he died, but he was still very weak and died 3 days later. If only the healthcare system was better back then, Jesus would have survived. That's right. Another argument for publicly funded healthcare, right? I'm sure that people who believe in the concept of crucifixion are going to actually do that. So, Joseph Stalin 45 over on Twitch, you keep putting up links. I can't link anything you link at Twitch. I can't put up on the screen. It's just the simple truth. And I can't. I don't just open links willy-nilly for very obvious reasons. If you want me to show something, right, ask me to search something, and I might do it. But it's I'm not just going to click on links. Yep. True Mai Lan, Vietnamese billionaire, sentenced to death for $44 billion in fraud. So in Vietnam, if you commit $44 billion worth of fraud, you get executed. In America, if you commit $200 billion worth of fraud and collapse the global economy, you get another $200 billion and they wave a finger and say, don't do that again. Who's handling it better, do you think? All right, very good. Thank you, Joseph. I just want to make sure. So here is a bullshit article that comes out of CNN Business. Here's a ridiculous article that actually made me angry when I read it, and so I'm going to read it to you, and you're going to get angry too. I cannot afford to live. Gen Z is full of financial angst despite inheriting a golden job market. New York, CNN. Gen Z is coming into the workforce, and in one of the grand traditions of what millennials cringingly called adulting, they're complaining about how much easier older generations had it. So begin by normalizing just, oh yeah, this is just what kids do, right? We haven't collapsed the economy and created nothing but woe and misery for them. This is just normal. Before all the boomers and slackers throw their tablets across the room, and so they know what they're doing, right? They know that what they're doing is being weird, creepy little fascists because they need to preface their thing and say like, oh, before you lose your mind about this obvious bullshit I'm about to tell you, let me note that Gen Zers, folks born between the late 90s and early 2010s, are entering adulthood during one of the strongest job markets in U.S. history. What evidence do we have for that? Nothing. But compared with millennials especially, who entered the workforce in the dark ages, known as the Great Recession, the Gen Z experience is a dream. So I love what these fascists do, right? They will confess one failure of the system they defend in order to try to prop up something that they think is a win. But they're literally just confessing in front of all of us right now, to your face, the system of capital is an abject failure for the millennial generation, right? We literally call it a dark age with a recession. But Gen Z's got it good, comparatively, because the line plummeted and went down to here, but now it's here. And so that's good. Right? How many times do I say on this channel that that's exactly what they're going to do to the housing market? That the housing market's going to go boo, and then it's going to go down like that, and they're going to be like, oh, housing prices lower than ever. Lowest housing prices in a decade. Because the line went up like this, and then it went down a little bit. This is the best economy we've seen for younger workers that anybody can remember. Just forget about the fact that a single wage earner, like literally my father's generation, used to be able to have one wage earner, house, wife, 3 kids, car, vacations, right? The Homer Simpson experience. But this is the best economy anybody can remember. You got 6 roommates and you can't pay the rent. Best economy ever. So here's the fraud, right? From now on, whenever you hear the name Brendan Duke, remember that you're dealing with a total fraud who has an education and bullshit nothing. Just a death cultist trying to convince you that this is a good economy even though you can't pay your bills. Senior Director for Economic Policy at the Center for American Progress, another fraudulent institution that we should definitely pay attention to. Their wages have gone up faster than inflation overall and more quickly than any other age cohort, he added. The evidence for this? Trust me, bro. Last year, the unemployment rate for 16 to 24-year-olds was 7.9%, the lowest it's been since 1953. So they're literally celebrating the fact that children now need to work full-time jobs. Last year, the unemployment rate for 16 to 24-year-olds was 7.9%, the lowest it's been since 1953, and far better than the, wait for it, 18.4 unemployment rate for that age group in 2010 coming out of the recession. So they're literally standing in front of you and saying, 16-year-olds are now working harder than ever. Successful society. Definitely a good thing that our children, instead of actually going and getting an education and actually learning something about the society and traveling and growing and becoming better people, are instead working at fucking McDonald's. Yay, successful society that definitely works. But Gen Z isn't having an easy go of it either. You literally just told us that you're putting more 16-year-olds to work than ever before. Congratulations, you fucking losers. Like all of us, hi, elder millennial here, they're struggling with an onslaught of inflation that has pushed prices rapidly higher over the past 3 years. I love it. This is an article that's trying to convince you. This is an article that's trying to convince you that things are actually okay, just confessing the total abject, complete failures of the system. The essentials have been particularly expensive. Food prices surged during the pandemic, and companies haven't been shy about keeping them elevated, even as supply chains recovered. Hey, yuckles, we're just gouging you. Shelter costs ballooned when the Federal Reserve jacked up interest rates, leading boomers, or anyone with a less than 3% mortgage, to stay in the homes they might otherwise have downsized out of. We can't seem to build homes fast enough to meet demand. It's a mess. We're also just not going to mention that huge swaths of the housing market is just owned by a psychopath class that's hoarding them, right? We just don't even mention that. Housing is a huge challenge for younger workers, Duke said. I think that's the part of the economy where we've seen the least progress when it comes to bringing down inflation. And that's the part of the economy where younger workers bear the brunt. Again, this is an article saying that Gen Z is actually doing great. Surviving inflation gets a lot easier if you own property. Homeowners can take out equity loans or count on getting a chunk of change when they sell. Gen Z hasn't had a chance to get a foot in the door. It's important to remember, Duke tells me, that younger workers are always starting out at a disadvantage when they enter the workforce in capitalist systems. Emphasis mine added. You start at an entry-level wage, gain experience, and typically you see your wages go up. Wages haven't gone up for anybody in 40 years. This guy's a total hack and a complete fraud. Of course, the long view is little comfort when you're 23 and slurping Badoga ramen with your 6 roommates. Isn't that great that they literally just say this out loud and expect you to just swallow it, right? Oh yeah, sure, we know that you're eating basically nothing while living with 6 roommates, but we super duper promise super duperly that if you just continue working full-time jobs and work your ass off completely, that it'll definitely get better. No, it won't. Like, no, it won't. You're going to have 6 roommates until you're 80, right? You're going to die in that room beside that dude you're sleeping on a couch with, right? And how do I know? Because that's what they're structuring the system to be like. That's what they're doing, and they're doing it on purpose, and it's obvious to anyone with a brain in their head. You've actually got to go get a degree in economics to be this fucking stupid. That's why you don't trust economists. Like, they're priests upholding a failed religious ideology, and you're watching it happening right in front of you. And they're even admitting it. They're just straight up telling you, yeah, you know, you're living in an apartment with 6 people and drinking ramen and all that kind of stuff. But if you sacrifice everything at the altar of capital, maybe you'll be able to live in a small apartment by yourself. Huh? Won't that be nice? Don't ask your dad how many kids he had and how big his house was. Don't and how hard he worked to get it. Don't ask your dad. Like, literally go watch Married with Children. Like, watch The Simpsons. Like, the reality is that a 23-year-old used to go right out of high school, right out of fucking university, get a job working a minimum wage job at a fucking shoe store in a mall, and have a house, a wife, 3 kids, a car, and that was real. That was a real thing that existed in our society, and they've destroyed it. And now they're pathetic little acolytes. They're disgusting little trolls and troglodytes, who they cart out in front of us with their credentials and their degrees and their fake religious ideology as they fraudulently tell us that they're experts. They try to pretend like all of this is fucking normal when it absolutely is fucking not normal at all. These guys should be thrown out of the society, should be humiliated and publicly embarrassed. Like, the idea that we're supposed to take these frauds seriously as they actively betray and abandon us is absurdism at the highest possible level. The idea that these guys are being published at all should be a desperate threat. That you should consider yourself under a propaganda war, the way that these fraudulent liars spew their bullshit in front of you. Literally, the headline after this: I can't afford to live. One giant difference between now and any other moment in history, Gen Z is entering adulthood armed with a menagerie of social platforms where they can publicly broadcast their financial angst, or conversely, gawk at peers who are having a better time thanks to generational wealth. These guys are literally saying that, yeah, the problem is actually that people can talk about it. Yeah, before people just suffered in silence and we kept them quiet because we had gatekeepers, right? So we could just throw people out on the street and nobody cared. But now you can actually talk to these people and humanize them, and that's a problem for the system of capital. It was way better for the system of capital when we could dehumanize these people and throw them out into the streets silently and you'd never know what was happening. That was the real problem. Last week, a TikTok user posted an angry rant about the cost of living that's since been viewed 5 million times on the platform, with tens of thousands of comments and shares. I make over 3 times the federal minimum wage and I cannot afford to live, he shouts into the camera. It is embarrassing to come out and say that it is a struggle to survive now, but I know so many people are struggling. Later, he concludes, the American dream is dead. Like much of the financial analysis on TikTok, the video goes a little off the rails. But the anger and despair point into a real and growing ennui that's taken root among younger people. So literally they just say, you're wrong, provide no evidence whatsoever, and then agree. Like, these people are frauds. Like, I don't know why we're listening to anybody with an economics degree from anywhere. Like, who gives a fuck about these obvious, overwhelming, total fraudulent losers who are clearly lying to you? Like, they're plundering you. That's what they're doing. They're erecting a religious ideology of plunder, and they're plundering you. And then when you stand up and complain about it, they say, no, you're fine. These people are nothing but propagandists. They're frauds of the highest order. Gen Zers are reporting higher rates of anxiety, depression, and distress than any other age group, according to a 2022 McKinsey study. Well, I can't imagine why. The jobs market's so good. The same study found that Gen Z was the least likely cohort to seek out medical care for those conditions, because behavioral care is too expensive. Oh, the system's totally working, though. Good job market. 16-year-olds are working harder than ever. Well, why are they complaining? Many Gen Zers also indicate their first step in managing behavioral health challenges was going to TikTok or Reddit for advice, the report said. Yeah, because it's free. It's hard to blame them, even though you do. Many in Gen Z had their formative school years blown up by a global pandemic. Now the oldest ones are grappling with an adulthood that may not permit them the benefits of home ownership, a comfortable home, or a stable climate. But what a great job market. What a great opportunity. That fatalism is particularly problematic when it comes to inflation, which is becoming harder to fight when consumers expect prices to keep running hot. A recent Bloomberg analysis based on UK data found that inflation expectations among people 16 to 24 have risen more than any other age group since the pandemic. A fact that researchers said can have a scarring effect. This is an article that's actually trying to defend the system of capital. You understand? This is being published by CNN Business, who's actually trying to convince you that things are great. The job market's so good. Just if you're 16, just work two full-time jobs and you too can live with 6 roommates. Millennials turn things around. I guarantee we have not. I guarantee it. It's not exactly sunny in Millennialville. These guys are such assholes. Like, the headline is Millennials turn things around, and the next line, it's not exactly sunny in Millennialville. Like, what a bunch of total dweebs and losers. We're running up huge piles of debt, and many share the feeling the American dream is out of reach. But distressed Gen Zers can take a bit of solace from the millennial experience. Many of us had no job prospects to speak of straight out of college, and slogged through a decade of stagnant wages. This is an article that's defending capitalism. All while the boomers who blew up the economy shamed us for living at home and eating avocado toast. Other jobless millennials flocked to graduate school, taking on even more debt. That's become a massive drag on economic mobility. This is a defense. That's another benefit of a strong labor market, Duke notes. You end up with fewer hapless young people taking on grad school debt that'll come back to haunt them. Just sell yourself into slavery at 16 and then you don't have school debt. It's a perfect system, completely working. Like, this is an article written by psychopaths for psychopaths, right? The only person who can read this and conclude anything other than your system is a failure and needs to be done away with is a rapacious slaver and a psychopath. Period, full stop. Like, if you're literally hearing this article being like, yeah, that sounds great, then you're a psycho. It took a long time, but millennials have in some ways caught up. We're outpacing Gen X in retirement savings as of 2022. Oh, this poor group of poor people are doing slightly better than this group of poor people. That's so great that Gen X doesn't have retirement. Super good for them. And since 2019, workers under the age of 40 saw wages go up by 14% on average. Productivity's up 250%. 14% wage increase. Wow. Meanwhile, inflation's also up like 20%. Like, these guys are baby brains, right? Like, they're just confessing to you how overwhelming the system of capital has failed, while simultaneously trying to be like, but everything's great. Like, eventually they're just going to tell you to go die, right? They're not even going to try to pretend. Yeah, 14% since when, exactly? Well, of course it's for psychopaths, says Methane. You're reading CNN Business. Yep. Like, and then up here, guys. Up here, look at this. This is so great. There's the Dow, right? The S&P, the NASDAQ. Fear and Greed Index. Greed is driving the U.S. market. Like, how much longer until our commentators are literally just like red-skinned, horn-wearing demons? How much longer until they're actually just standing in front of us being like, how much longer until they're just like, the U.S. market is being driven by greed. Gorthak the Destructor thinks that we need to be more greedier and greedier than before. And then they cut to like just like this like dog-faced, just horned demon being like, no, we need to raise the fear index. Greed is not enough to run a demonic empire. Boo! And then they'll like argue and throw shit at one another. And that'll be like the political analysis that we get on CNN. Like, and then like every so often, like, we've got the special guest, Bethalzalar. Bethalzalar, what do you see as the problem in our economy? We need to torture more slaves. Thank you for your input, Bethalzalar. Torture does spread fear. Like, we're basically already there. We've had pundits outright say a hungry dog is an obedient dog. Like, we've seen these clips. We've seen this stuff. These people are demons. They just are. They haven't taken the masks off yet. Like, it's just unbelievable to watch these kinds of fucking things. Yeah, like this was a big radicalizing moment for me, and it's worth bringing up again. We knew, this is a quote from Nixon policy advisor John Ehrlichman, right? So the Nixon administration, we knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. Like, I don't know what people need to see anymore. I don't know, right? Oh, we got a nice beard. Thank you, sir. Come to Islam, true religion, way to God. No thanks. Right? I appreciate Islam. I'm not a Islamophobe. I understand that it is the culture that has come out of the Middle East that has tried to discuss the concept of God, right? But I'm just not a fundamentalist. Like, I've got the Quran right over here. Nice read. I actually think the Quran is way better written than the New Testament, because the New Testament was like an assortment of things, right? Whereas the Quran is like one clear thing. I imagine that a reading of the Quran, like in its intentional manner, like when the Quran was written, I bet it was awesome. Like, I bet that when it was performed, it was super cool. Right? It makes total sense that it was very powerful and very interesting. But like, I'm not going to convert. Like, cool book, right? Definitely, we can have a conversation about it. But I don't think magic is real. I just don't. It's not going to happen. If you ever get into investing, just remember that billionaires are made in the bear markets. Yeah, if I have to convert to an Abrahamic religion, I choose Islam, but of course, I've no cause to. Yeah, like, I mean, I think that a big struggle that we are having as people is that we have the the communication systems that we have now are more robust than they've ever been. And all of these disparate religious ideas, which were completely based on geography and nothing else, are now coming into conflict with one another in a way that they haven't been able to in the history of humanity. That you have moments in human history, like in the 10th century Jerusalem, there was very large, robust, interesting debates going on between many different faiths and many different ideologies. And so there wasn't so much fundamentalism. People were willing to hear out from what other groups and what other religious ideas and thoughts had to say. And that was a really beautiful moment and a beautiful time in human history, because you had a lot of interesting perspectives being brought forward. Because there wasn't so much fundamentalism. And it was just kind of understood that we're all having a discussion about the same thing, but we built our own cultures and customs around that thing. And of course, none of us are going to be able to capture the fullness of the expression of what it is we're talking about. And so we should take seriously other people's perspectives, because they might have a piece. They might have a piece to it. That in the 10th century, that was really understood that like it's like that classic idea, right? If somebody is staring at an elephant and they're staring at the side of the elephant and it's right here, right? Whereas another person is like at the back end of the elephant and all they can really see is the tail, and another person's at the front of it and they can really only interact with the trunk, right? So the guy who's like right at the elephant is gonna be, well, it's a panel that's gray. Right? And the other guy's going to be like, no, it's long and wispy with like a little bit of hair on the bottom. And the other guy's going to be like, no, it's a cylinder that's like very flexible and has like a movement to it. Right? And if all three of those guys are fundamentalists, well, then they're going to constantly fight about that. Whereas if they're not fundamentalists, they're going to go, oh, well, clearly we're too close to the thing to be able to see the whole thing. So maybe we can create a larger picture of it if we put our heads together and create a larger idea of what it is we're experiencing and what it is we're having. But because we live in a period of heightened fundamentalism, and there's good reasons for it, right? Like, capitalist imperialism is doing everything it can to exterminate Arabs, right? It's literally launching a genocide against an Arab population in Gaza. It's committed an intentional famine in Yemen. The wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, right? Like, if you're a Muslim living in the Muslim world, it's very difficult to conclude anything other than these guys are trying to wipe us out, right? So under those circumstances, of course, people become fundamentalist, right? And the only people who are willing to commit such atrocities in the name of their Christ who they despise would also be fundamentalists, right? My magic book that has magic in it is literally the truth, and Jesus wrote it all down. Like, you know, it's just madness. And so I get why there is this like strong cultural desire. Like, no, there's something here. This is the truth. This is the one truth, right? Bombs are dropping around you and you're holding and you're clinging onto your culture and all of that, right? So I understand why fundamentalism is big right now, but we got to let it all go. Like, we got to let all this fundamentalism go. Like, the Bible does not contain the one truth. The Quran does not contain the one truth, right? It's writing about the one truth, and it's writing about the nature of God, and it's writing about the nature of the universe, and it's writing about that kind of thing, but it itself does not contain it, right? It is not the only I that, if you wanted to get serious about it, it would be about consuming all of this stuff and learning as much as you possibly can, and learn as much as you possibly can about the nature of creation and your creator, because your creator is much bigger than a book that was written by a man, right? Much, much bigger than that. And fundamentalists, if they do read their texts, they generally read the text as if they are like literal documents written literally by literal God, literally. And it's like, obviously not. Like, obviously these books were written by men in order to articulate something that's much larger and much grander than they are, which is the nature of creation. Why are we here? What are we doing here? What is this? What is the purpose of our existence? Is there a purpose to our existence? What is our nature in relation to reality? What is our connection to the universe? We were spawned out of the universe, and to the universe we return. So what is it that we are intended to do here? What is it that we're supposed to be trying to discover, or supposed to be trying to communicate with one another? Or because it certainly isn't to make a whole bunch of fake funny money dollars for some losers we hate, right? Like, you're not here to work a job that's pointless for some asshole you'll never meet, who despises you and hates you, and has shown over and over again that he will just obliterate you and your family if it makes him a penny. Like, we're not supposed to be spending our lives doing that. Like, it's so clear and it's so obvious, and it's just what we're all doing. It's wild to me. So it seems to me like we're completely caught up in a religious hysteria, that we're caught up in a religious ideology where we're worshiping money, and we're worshiping those who accumulate money as if they are holy gods and holy priests, when they're obviously frauds and Nazis and fascists and kooky weirdos, right? Who despise their creator, who despise the world that they live in, who certainly despise you and see you as nothing other than cattle to be harvested and used, right? So we're living under this false religion, this false ideology, this false god of money that says, oh, you just need to accumulate more of me and then you'll be happy. And the evidence is in. People who accumulate mass sums of money are miserable, right? They feel alienated. They feel like they don't have a community. They don't have anything going for them. They just have a lot of money so they can drive around in Bugattis and shoot themselves at space if they want, right? And then what do they end up doing? They just buy Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island because they don't know what else to do but to pursue their most base instincts, which is obviously have sex with little girls, right? Like these people are despicable, and we've based our entire religious ideology around them. Like, no. Like, no. Maybe we should actually believe in the idea that the universe is probably more vast and large than Jeff Bezos. Maybe we should actually start buying into the idea that a living universe that spawned life is probably larger than the system of finance capital. Maybe we should actually think about the idea that, blowing up reality so that a couple of psychopaths can shoot themselves at space every so often, maybe that's a stupid thing to do. Maybe that's a dumb thing to do that a bunch of people are only doing because they're caught in a religious hysteria, where the only thing that matters is having a small handful of psychopaths play at being God. Like, it's just we live in this ridiculous moment in time where it's so childishly obvious what's going on, and instead of everybody just saying like, oh yeah, like who cares about this money? Who gives a shit at all? Like, who cares at all? Like, every single time these business owners and these economists and everybody stand up and say, oh, but the money line, Why do we care about the money line? Meanwhile, they're throwing people into the streets. There's homelessness everywhere. People are dying of starvation. We're causing plagues and famine. We use our money in order to build military forces wherever we go and just spread nothing but chaos and disorder everywhere we go. But money line, oh, that money line, boy howdy, is that the thing that really matters and is definitely something we should care about. Like, it's a false god. We've erected a false god. And I respect and understand why Muslims are speaking out against that through the Quran. And I respect why certain Christians, like maybe 5% of people who call themselves Christians, speak out against that through their Bible. And I respect why atheists speak out against that by trying to use philosophers and evidence from the real world, the sciences. And I respect why Buddhists will use the words of Buddha, and I respect why the Hindus will use the Vedas. But boy howdy, if somebody's going to stand in front of me and try to say that one book is better than the other and that we should sacrifice everything at the altar of sense and logic in order to prop up some book that was clearly written by a man, I'm going to be like, nah, no thanks. I get why you're doing it, but I'm not going to join you. Like, the universe is much, 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 much more vast and large and insane than some guy writing in the 14th century. Like, it's just this never-ending depth of, like, externally infinite and internally infinite, with humans being sort of, and with the created living beings being sort of the place that exists at the center of it, to be able to articulate any of that to one another. Like, we're just amazing. Chess Baiter on Twitch writes, do you agree with the statement the left should be atheist? I don't. I consider myself to be a theist. I annoy people by saying I'm a secular theist, right? I think that nature itself reveals the existence of God. That we have been asking the wrong question for a long time now. That the question is not, does God exist? Right? That's the wrong question to ask, because it gets you thinking about things incorrectly right off the bat. You can erect some straw man version. Like there's the giant spaghetti monster is the perfect example of this, right? You erect an image of a being that lives within the confines of reality, and then you say that doesn't exist, as if you've done something or achieved anything, right? The question to ask yourself is the universe alive? Is the universe a living entity? Does it have is it a life force of its own? Right? And the answer has to be yes. Just from like a mathematical tautology, it has to be yes, that the universe is alive, right? If you consider yourself to be alive, and if you consider there to be life in the universe, well, then the universe has to be as alive as that. And that we know of the concept of collective consciousness. We know what the zeitgeist is. The CIA has even done studies on this concept of collective consciousness. And so we have to say that the universe is a living entity and has a life of its own. And once you start talking about the universe in that kind of a way, you begin to understand what these religious texts are actually driving towards. And you begin to understand what they're trying to say. Because it's easy to be an atheist when you think that, like, oh, this magic book is trying to convince me magic is real, right? That's an easy atheist position. Right? It's much more difficult to grapple with what religious theologians have actually been saying through time, which is that we live in a living organism. This is a living system that has its own life and that has created you, and that you exist within creation in order to investigate creation. That we are the ears and the eyes and the mouth of creation, attempting to discover what creation actually is on behalf of the creator. And we kind of get lost in the sauce on all of this. We get lost in weird kind of theological back alleys, because it's easy to get lost in theological back alleys once you disconnect from the reality that what we are actually discussing when we're discussing the concept of God is a living organism, is a living creature that we are part of, that we are within, and that is within us and without us, that we exist because of it and we exist within it. It is us and we are it. And we are collectively, each and every one of us, all equal in our validity, in our creation and in the status of our creation, as we attempt to discover what the fuck is this thing? Why are we here? What is this? And that the life form that spawned us is just as confused about what's going on as we are. It doesn't know what's going on, right? Like that. This is where I diverge pretty significantly from theologians of the past, who had this kind of idea that like God is a good being that exists within and spreads his goodness. And there's lots of evidence to show that God's not good. Lots of evidence to show that's the case. I think it's mainly just confused. I don't think it knows what's going on. I think it created everything because it could, and it didn't know what it was doing, right? It didn't create consciously. We're just here. Like that's just the truth of it, that we're just here dealing with it, and we're trying to. And if you look at the arc of history tends to show that we go towards not goodness, but novelty. That seems to be the arc of history. That it doesn't look that it doesn't look like the universe gives a shit about goodness, right? It looks like what the universe cares about is things being more and more novel. Right, and that if it does arc towards goodness, then that would be great. I'm super in favor of that. I know that when I find myself in contemplation, prayer, or meditation, I'm constantly being like, "Hey, I hope this is working out. I hope this is all for some kind of actual thing that's actually cool." But historically speaking, like it looks like the arc of the universe is basically just like, "Oh wow, that's way cooler. Oh man, that's super neat. Oh man, that's awesome. Oh wow." Right? So Kantan asks, and I think this is important to ask. I think this is a good question, right? I still don't know what I'm obliged to do with this living universe. Okay, the universe is alive. And so, is there duty or not? What is the law? I think that the biggest reason, the number one reason why I think it's important to acknowledge that we live in a living universe is because it alters the perception of the creation, right? Like right now we're just running around like we're all independent individuals, just harvesting what we can, right? Like that's the primary position of humanity right now. Just gobble up as much as you possibly can, consume as much as you possibly can, eat as much as you possibly can, fucking destroy, burn down, tear out the land, rip up the dead, spawn, burn them as fast as you can. Climate change, who gives a fuck, right? We're just like rabid animals, just tearing everything apart. And if we could get it into our heads that maybe this is actually a living organism, right? Maybe we'd start to act a little bit more prudently, not just out of a sense of self-protection, because I mean that's a fine thing to you should be fearful of tearing apart your own reality for a small scale benefit, just because that reality might turn on you, which we're seeing with climate change very clearly. But you might generally begin to tiptoe around. You might generally begin to actually say like, hey, maybe we shouldn't mess with this thing so much. Like maybe we should be more careful. Maybe we should actually have some respect, goddammit. You know, as Christ said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, right? Number one. Well, and then there's also number two, that if you actually held this belief that we're in a living organism, then it means everything you interact is part of that living organism, right? The person who's across from you, the animal that's in across from you, any of this kind of stuff, they're not resources to be exploited, right? They don't exist to be exploited. They exist as part of a living, breathing entity. They exist as equally valid as you are, as a person who is just here trying to make the best of what's going on, trying to figure out what it is. And the more and more you get this into your head, the more and more you realize that you are walking around listening and speaking and hearing with the instruments of God, and that you are part of this godhood, and that you have equal validity, that for all of the gaslighting and the shitting on and the bullshit that the system of capital throws your way, none of that matters, because your creator created you, and if it's good enough for your creator, then it's good enough for anybody, and it's good enough for me. And when you're talking to someone, you are talking to another aspect of yourself and another aspect of your creator. That we all are actually equal, and not equal in the way that conservatives will say that, oh, well, that person's very tall and that person's very short. We're not talking about the equality of outcome even, or the equality of capability. We're talking about the equality of validity, that you are equally valid and you should be treated as equally valid, because we are all part of this larger living organism. And that was articulated again by Christ when he said, love your neighbor as yourself. So these ideas have persisted throughout the theology for a long time, but instead of that, we're all supposed to listen to a bunch of kooks who are being like, yep, a magic man rose him from the grave, and that was a literal thing that actually happened. We're serious people. So yes, I consider myself a theologian. I don't consider myself, I consider myself a theist. I don't consider myself a Christian or a Muslim or Jewish or Hindu or any of that kind of stuff. I understand why those exist, and I understand why they persist. I get it, right? I don't hate them, right? But we need to be creating something that goes above that and understands that those are all articulations of a singular idea, and that they're not enemies of one another. Right? Like right now we're literally launching a crusade in the Middle East over this shit. And it's just brutal. It's just brutal. In regards to what we're obliged to do, there are laws, right? You have to eat. You need to protect yourself from exposure. These are rules, right? You're not supposed to spew a bunch of carbon into the atmosphere. That's a rule, right? There are very clearly limits and very clearly things that we have been told we have to do. Right? You must eat. Real clear. Like, I think that the rules that we have to exist by are very straightforward and very simple and obvious. You don't need to create an argument, right? Eat or die, right? Pretty straightforward. And so because that's so obviously an edict that's been given to us by the universe, then one of the most evil things a person can do is withhold food from another person. Because the universe has decreed, you need food. Like, you need food. If you don't get food, you die. So it should be our primary objective as a species to ensure that everyone has access to food and everyone has access to shelter. Because that's a rule that's been given to us by our creator. And if we don't abide by that rule, then we weaken ourselves and we weaken our creator in this reality, and we make things worse. We make things worse for ourselves. We make things worse for creation itself. And we don't actually, we're not actually trying to achieve what has to be the actual goal of all of this, which is to discover what this is, right? Instead of that, we just empower a bunch of psychopaths so that they can make fake little money dollars and worship a false god, so that they can go off to Jeffrey Epstein's fucking pedophile island. It doesn't make any goddamn sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. So, I hope that answers the question. No, Buddhism's fine. Like, I mean, if you look behind me, right? Like, I've got this chakra poster, right? Like, that's something that I really use. Like, I really perceive myself in this manner, right? But not in a, like, there are literally spheres literally in my body, literally. Right? I'm not literally saying to anybody, you literally have literal spheres of magic that are in your body, literally. That's not what it's for. Right? It's just a way to communicate about your, it's just a way to communicate about yourself. It's a way to communicate about your body. It's a way to communicate about your emotions. It's a way to think about your emotional self and ask serious questions of yourself, to try to center yourself in the world and get okay with yourself and get a handle on your emotions. Like, humans are primarily emotional creatures. We are primarily emotional. Intellect comes after. We don't rationalize, for the most part, we don't rationalize before things happen. We rationalize after they happen, right? We post-rationalize. Hindsight is 20/20, as they say, right? That kind of thing. So we're not... Oh, you just want to pivot, right? What do I think about the Great Replacement? I think that's pretty straightforward Nazi propaganda that the Nazis have always used. Like, if there is a replacement that happens, it's not being done consciously. Like, I think that's kind of what I've always been talking about, right? Like, we're emotional. We're primarily emotional, right? Things happen, and we just are dealing with the things that happen. The great the irony of what's called the Great Replacement. Okay, so the reason why this Great Replacement theory happens is because you have a big upswell of immigration into your country, and that makes white supremacists start to say, all of these brown people are coming in and they're gonna replace all of us whites. It's a Great Replacement theory, and these guys are plotting against us, and so we should round them up. Right? It's a pretty straightforward fascist line. The irony of the Great Replacement people is that they are the primary reason why the immigration is happening and coming into their country, right? Like, if you bomb everywhere else, if you bomb and make the entire rest of the world unsafe, well, then people are going to flee to the place that isn't getting bombed, right? And where is not getting bombed? America. America doesn't really bomb itself very often. It does bomb itself from time to time, but not very often. And so if you want to escape the death squads, and you want to escape the bombing, and you want to escape the sanction regime, and you want to escape the terror that's being spread throughout the entire rest of the globe, thanks to the CIA, the FBI, and the State Department, the military, Lockheed Martin, and all these other organizations, if you want to escape all of that, where do you go? You go to the one place they're not bombing. So that would be the United States. And then when they actually get there, fleeing from the war machine that's been spread throughout the entire planet, what do they meet? A bunch of white supremacists going, these guys are coming in here to intentionally replace us. It's a Great Replacement theory. So it's a cycle. It's a cycle of death and destruction caused by people who are not intellectually thinking that way, but who are just fascists. Right? They like suffering. They enjoy seeing other people suffer, right? That's just built into them. It's just what they want to do, and it's what they want to achieve in the world. They want to maximize the amount of suffering they spread into the world. And so they support these ideas and these thoughts. And if you were to actually show them the structure of the system, this is why fascists are somewhat a lost cause, is that if you really showed them the system and you showed them what it was they were actually supporting, they would actually be in favor of it, because it maximizes the suffering. And that's what fascists are. They're there to maximize the suffering. And we've built a society that seems to want to maximize the suffering. That there are small groups of people who haven't been completely destroyed, and they're fighting back against that idea. But the fascists are very popular in the society. So I'm not so what happens, to kind of continue this thought tinder, is that ideas like the Great Replacement theory, instead of being far-right fascist ideology, get thought of as centrist ideas, right? So that because we don't want to admit and acknowledge how far to the right our societies have gotten and how fascist we are as a people, we think that fascist ideas are normal. And we think that when these fascist ideas get put in front of us, we're all supposed to go, well, that's a centrist position for sure, instead of it being like an extremely far-right fascist thought. So it's I hope that has kind of convinced you to be a bit more skeptical of the ideas that are coming out of these places, because we should not be normalizing far-right fascist ideologies. And that's the Great Replacement theory for sure. Oh, Curtis, capitalism has its flaws. This is the best economic system we have. Right? Just tell me you live in a bubble, bud. Real straightforward. The people who are saying that kind of thing live in a bubble. You live in a little bubble where the colonization of the rest of the world and the death caused by the rest of the world and the exploitation of the rest of the world, you don't see it, right? You're never confronted by it. It's invisible to you, right? So as long as you're doing well, then capitalism's the best system of the world. It doesn't matter if 1 million people need to suffer and die and be in slavery for it. You're doing well. Sure, capitalism's the greatest system in the world. You're doing well, and that's all that matters. June writes, I think the first step of turning Turf Island into a trans-ethno-state is creating the conditions which would make living there unfeasible for the cissoids. June coming out hard. June coming out hard. You're going to kick that can, are you, June? I got to tell you, June, you keep coming in and you keep like swinging hard on stuff. I can't tell. And this is what I like about you, June. I can't tell if you're being serious or not. You know what I mean? Like here's the capitalist society that you live in right here. This is from the Maple. Expert warned victims of communist monument could honor Nazis. 2021 report. TikTok, this is an article from the Maple. You can go to readthemaple.com and you can find this article. This is a published article in a reputable source. Do not ban me for reporting on the news. TikTok, how dare you? How dare you? A wall of remembrance that honors all the victims of communism named in this document will attract controversy and criticism. This is by Taylor C. Noakes. An expert warned Canadian Heritage that names listed for commemoration on the Victims of Communism Monument in Ottawa could be linked to Nazi collaborators and potential war criminals, a confidential report obtained by the Maple shows. The 2021 report, authored by historian Michael Petro, told the government department that they would need to conduct extensive background research on hundreds of the submitted names to ensure against problematic commemorations. The Maple obtained Petro's report through an access to information request. Previous informal requests for the report were declined. The Victims of Communism Monument was originally a private initiative led by the charity Tribute to Liberty, but it has since been taken over by the Department of Canadian Heritage. Tribute to Liberty remains an active participant in the project and was slated to develop as yet undefined public educational materials for the monument at some point in the future. A CBC News report in 2021 revealed the names of wartime Nazi collaborators and assorted fascists had been listed for commemoration on Tribute to Liberty's website. The names having been submitted to the charity by donors as part of a fundraising drive. Tribute to Liberty then supplied the list of names to Canadian Heritage in order for them to be commemorated on the monument's Wall of Remembrance. It is not clear if Tribute to Liberty undertook any kind of independent analysis or assessment of the names provided to them by the donors before turning over the lists to Canadian Heritage. The CBC report indicated that the names of 2 high-profile Nazi collaborators were removed from the Tribute to Liberty website. At the time, Tribute to Liberty chair Ludwig Klimkowski said it was premature to comment on the names listed on his charity's website, as they and Canadian Heritage were still reviewing the final commemorative list. This review, he said, would be completed by the end of 2021. Petro's report was submitted to Canadian Heritage in the spring of that year. Canadian Heritage said in an emailed statement to the Maple that it was not responsible for the content of Tribute to Liberty's website. Controversy and criticism. In his January 2021 report, Petro warned that a wall of remembrance that honors all the victims of communism named in this document will attract controversy and criticism. Several of the named victims were fascists and Nazi collaborators, or belonged to groups that might be described as such. Names associated with the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists and its armed wing, the Ukrainian Insurgent Army, were identified by Petro as being the most problematic. Commemorations to the OUN, UPA, and the wartime leaders of those organizations, such as Stepan Bandera, Roman Shukovich, and Yaroslav Stetsko, can be found in several locations across Canada. There are also at least 2 monuments dedicated to veterans of the 14th Waffen SS Galicia Division in Canada, one of which was recently removed from an Oakville cemetery. There was considerable overlap in the membership of the OUN, Galicia Division, and the UPA. Because of these groups' direct involvement in mass murder and ethnic cleansing, Petro wrote that some of the higher-profile members of the OUN UPA would be easy to identify, and justifying their exclusion from the monument would be relatively straightforward. Petro singled out UPA leader Shukovich, who is commemorated at a highly controversial monument in Edmonton, as an example. However, Petro noted that detailed information was lacking for most of the OUN UPA member listed for commemoration. We do not have details about the wartime activities of most of the named victims who were members of the OUN UPA, wrote Petro. It would be tricky to know where to draw the line. The department may have to decide whether it should honor any members of the OUN UPA at all. Isn't it great how anytime there's something that's anti-communist, it just ends up being Nazism? Isn't that amazing? Every single time. It's like, well, I'm anti-communist, and I think that Stepan Bandera is the best. Isn't that weird? Isn't it strange how that actually works out? Petro identified 3 potential avenues that Canadian Heritage could pursue concerning the problematic commemorations. First, Petro suggested the department could research the most high-profile individuals he flagged and remove them from the monument if additional research confirmed Petro's suspicions. Yeah, but they want to, right? They want to commemorate these guys. Like, don't you get it? The reason why they're anti-communist is because they're Nazis. Like, you understand this? Like, we honored a Nazi in Canadian Parliament because we wanted to. Like, that's what's going on here in Canada. He further indicated that taking the narrow view would also likely result in lesser-known collaborators and fascists making it onto the monument, which in turn would inevitably draw criticism from the public. And the problem is that if they remove all the problematic names, they're just going to have a blank slate. You got to remove all the Nazis, you got to remove all the fascists, right? You got to remove all the people who just died of natural causes, like happened in the Black Book of Communism. You got to remove all of these people. So if you do that, oh yeah, you got to also remove all the Tsarists, right? The imperialists. You got to remove all of these people from these lists. And the second you do, what do you end up with? You end up with a blank fucking slate. So they don't want to do it. Why? Because then they've got nothing. Because guess what? They've got nothing. The second option would be develop a criteria to judge the submitted names, apply it equally, and conduct extensive research into the life of every individual listed for commemoration. That sounds like work, and fascists are notoriously lazy. Petro noted this would be a considerable undertaking and that donors may not cooperate with the department's investigations. Yeah, because they don't want to find out that their families were actually Nazi collaborators. A third option would be to only name the donors, and not who they proposed as a victim of communism. Petro indicated this would avoid most potential criticism, but would likely be very unpopular with the donors. Yeah, because it would out them. Yeah, we're trying to be Nazis up in here, and we don't want people to know who we are. The Maple asked Canadian Heritage which of these avenues, if any, they chose to pursue. Department spokesperson Caroline Chazowski said, Canadian Heritage is currently reviewing the names and events that have been proposed by Tribute to Liberty. We are not in a position to disclose further information about the process at this stage. There is no war in Bosses-and-Say. If this is the case, it would be at least the second time the department has publicly admitted it has reviewed the names of those proposed for commemoration. Holocaust envy. The Maple learned that Canadian Heritage also contacted University of Ottawa historian Jan Grabowski in April 2023 for help in reviewing the commemorative list. In an interview, Grabowski told the Maple he had heard criticisms and concerns for years about the monument being a countermeasure to the Holocaust monument, about the need to elevate the suffering of the victims of communism to the level of the Holocaust. Scholars refer to this as Holocaust envy, Grabowski explained. I would actually argue that what it is, it's a way for Nazis to pretend like they're not evil dicks. Now everybody's like this. Everybody's doing it. We're normal. Look how normal we are. See, the communists did it too. We're normal. We're not special in our crazy psychopathic nature. We're normal. No, you're not. You're a Nazi. You're psychopathic. Stop spreading your bullshit around. Support for the monument came from right-wing nationalist organizations that are mostly active among Canadians of Eastern European backgrounds, he added. I also heard about the planned individual commemoration of some very unsavory characters, some of them linked to mass murder of Jews during the Holocaust. Grabowski told the Maple that he responded to Canadian Heritage offers with 3 strict conditions, including that his recommendations be accepted in full, and that if the department failed to do so, they would have to remove his name from the file. Grabowski also insisted that he be able to review all names previously submitted to and vetted by the department, and that he have the right to remove individuals listed for commemoration based on their organizational affiliations. The government refused Grabowski's terms. It's unclear how they proceeded. The public unveiling of the Victims of Communism monument had been scheduled for November 2nd, 2023. However, this was put on hold shortly after the scandal surrounding Parliament's standing ovation for Galicia Division veteran Yaroslav Hunka in late September. Yeah, probably bad to put up a poll venerating Nazis while you're actively venerating a Nazi in our Parliament. A report in the Ottawa Citizen referencing documents obtained through an access to information request confirmed that Canadian Heritage decided to postpone the monument's unveiling on October 13th, 2023, as a direct result of the Hunka scandal. At that time, plans for the unveiling were already in their final stages. In the documents obtained by the Citizen, a Canadian Heritage project manager said the department was already concerned about the possibility of Nazis being named on the monument. We love them. We love them. The same concern was echoed by Global Affairs Canada, which warned that Canada's international reputation could be damaged if the monument's commemorative elements were not properly vetted. They are being properly vetted. They want the Nazis on the thing. They just don't want you to know about it or care. Other problematic names identified. The problematic entries were not limited to wartime Ukrainian collaborators. Petro also identified multiple entries linked to the independent state of Croatia, a wartime Nazi puppet state, its fascist militia, the Ustase, and nationalist groups from the Baltic states. In his preliminary review of the names submitted for commemoration, Petro identified at least one Latvian national who volunteered for the SS. Where exactly these names were drawn from is not clear. The matter was complicated by Canadian Heritage deferral of questions from the Maple to Tribute to Liberty, and the latter organization's general unwillingness to speak to the press. Oh wow, Nazis, they don't want to out themselves. The group did not respond to a request for comment from the Maple for this story. Tribute to Liberty had originally sought to commemorate 1,000 victims of communism on the monument's Wall of Remembrance, but a list of only 300 names had been compiled by the end of 2015. So, literally a massive failure from the outset. We're gonna find 1,000 people and put them on a name to say they're victims of communism, and they can only find 300. And in that 300 are literal Nazis. Literally just like, you know who's a real victim of communism? Adolf Hitler. Well, yeah, communism definitely got him, right? In 2021, Canadian Heritage said they were considering a commemorative list of about 600 names. So still 40% short of their original goal. Full of Nazis! The names may have all been selected from Tribute to Liberty's main fundraising effort. This entailed a virtual Buy a Brick campaign called Pathway to Liberty. Dude, this is some American shit right here, dude. This is like so overwhelming. We gotta put up a tribute to liberty. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna put a Buy a Brick campaign up on our website. And that'll let people build a pathway to liberty. So that when they walk through their town, they can look at a monument that reminds them of the dangers of communism killing a bunch of Nazis. Remember, Nazis get killed by communists. It's very dangerous to be a Nazi around communists, and you should never forget it. You should never forget it. Yeah, you should never forget it. When Grabowski was contacted by the Canadian Heritage in April 2023, there were approximately 400 to 500 names up for consideration. Most of the individuals identified by Petro in his 2021 preliminary review remain listed on Tribute to Liberty's website today. Of the 8 names identified by Petro as having connections with the OUN and UPA, only Shukovich was removed. The rest include a senior OUN official and UPA veterans, among others. So we'll get the big Nazi, but the little Nazis can stay. All 4 names identified by Petro as having been linked to individuals who served with the Nazis during the war remain on the website. Cardinal this is a name, Alojzij Stepanak. I definitely am not getting that first name ever. A polarizing Croatian Catholic priest who was tried and convicted in Yugoslavia after the war for his support of the fascist regime, as well as Ivan Orsenik, leader of the Ustase youth, also remain listed. Man, they just can't help themselves, eh? This is how it is. This is how it always is. Yeah, the Black Book of Communism, Nazis. Petro also told Canadian Heritage there was insufficient information about roughly half the names listed for commemoration, although these included several names that belong to individuals who appear not to have been directly impacted by communism, including because they were born in Canada. So, on the one hand, you've got literal Nazis, right? Real victims of communism, right? Nazis. And then on the other hand, you just got a bunch of people who are born in Canada whose victimhood by communism is, oh, my Nazi grandpa was killed by communists. Everything was going so well for us in our country before the communists came and took away our slave plantations. I'm upset by that. My family should have been able to have those slave plantations. There's your victims of communism. As well, Petro identified individuals who died before the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917. An Ottawa realtor with no obvious connection to communism, a murdered Sikh Canadian journalist, and the interwar dictator of Latvia. Petro also noted that several virtual bricks were dedicated to Canadian veterans of the Korean War. On that basis, he reiterated that the department may need a precise definition to who constitutes a victim of communism. We went over there to Korea and we bombed the shit out of them and murdered a bunch of them, and they shot back. They shot back. Victims of communism. The communists shot back when we tried to blow the shit out of them and cause a major war and divide their country in two. Yeah, they shot back. The Maple asked Canadian Heritage why some of the names Petro identified were still listed on Tribute to Liberty's website. Spokesperson Caroline Kajowski replied that the department is not responsible for the charity's website and suggested that such questions be directed to them. The Maple reached out to Canadian Heritage on October 2023 about the postponement of the monument's unveiling and asked what efforts the department was taking to revise the names listed for commemoration. Chizowski responded that the Government of Canada continues to work diligently in collaboration with Tribute to Liberty. So literally the Government of Canada is just confessing that we're collaborating with Nazis here, right? Like, Tribute to Liberty is a Nazi organization. They're putting Nazis up on a plaque to be like, these are victims of communism. The good men and women who fought against communism and rounded up a bunch of Jews and caused the Holocaust, but fought against communism, and that's what's important. And the Canadian government's basically just being like, yeah, this is an organization that we definitely should be working with. We should 100% continue working with an organization that keeps suggesting Nazis to put up on a plaque somewhere. 100%. Well, we're honoring Nazis in Parliament. We might as well work with them. When asked if Canadian Heritage had ever inquired why the problematic names identified by Petro remain on the Tribute to Liberty website, Kajowski repeated her response that the questions pertaining to the website cannot be answered by the department. Why are you working with the department? Why are you working with them? They keep suggesting Nazis. Maybe say, perhaps working with Nazis and their collaborators is a bad idea. Maybe we should stop. No, you're not going to do that? I wonder why. According to Canadian Heritage, the unveiling of the $7.5 million monument will occur at some point in 2024, with the exact date to be selected in consultation with Tribute to Liberty. Listen how much money these psychopaths are willing to spend venerating a bunch of Nazis. $7.5 million. Do you think we could do literally anything with $7.5 million? Like, we should tax these people out of existence. Like, wealthy people need to no longer exist. Period. Full stop. Like, if you have $1 million, you're good. We're done. No more money for you, period. You don't get to earn anything else. You're done. Finished. Over. Complete. Mission accomplished. You want a little, we'll give you a little badge. You did it. You got $1 million. Congratulations. Right? A signed letter by the Queen of England or whatever. Right? Whatever is going to make you feel good about yourself. I did it. I crossed the goal. I got a special star from the government. Right? But we got to get rid of these people. Because it's obviously empowering the absolute worst people in the society, and it's making people terrible. It's turning people into psychopaths. Like, it very clearly is doing that. As with the unveilings of other monuments, the public will not be invited to attend. Yeah. Right? You want it to be like a weird little Nazi ritual for your cult, right? That's what you obviously want. And if the public was invited to attend, people like me might show up and just be like, "Hey, you fucking Nazis!" Because guess what? You fucking are. Defensible system, though. The system of capital is definitely defensible. Best we've got. Can't do any better. Methane writes, given the choice between the two, seems I prefer the wrong choice. History is repeated. That most prefer the wrong choice. Yeah. Lucid Links. Don't know if I've ever seen you here before, Lucid Links. Did everyone involved in this project forget the poem, First They Came? Yeah, they don't give a shit about that. Like, they don't care. Right? Like, they don't care. Like, the poem doesn't include, and then they came for the Nazis. Right? And they're the Nazis. Like, they're the ones that want to round the people up. Like, that poem doesn't include a rounding up of them. They're the ones doing the rounding up. Nova Scotia, how about a Victims of Capitalism monument? Dude, we'd be making that forever. How big a monument do you want? How tall does it need to be? I feel like all we'd be doing is etching names. DM, how you doing? Hello, John. Senate Republicans, fascists, yeah, are prepared to end the child. I mean, dude, you don't need to preface Senate Republicans as fascists, because the Democrats are also fascists, right? Like, if you are in the system of capital at any position of power anywhere, congratulations, you're a fascist, right? Maybe you're a fascist that thinks we should have more healthcare. Maybe you're a fascist that thinks, like, we should probably, like, maybe we should do inclusionary stuff so we can have, like, black people in the system, in systems of power, right? Just as long as we separate the society between the poor and the rich and tell the poor that they're poor because God made them that way, right? Anyway, sorry. Senate Republicans are prepared to end the child tax credit bill. Nothing surprises me anymore. They have no problem sending billions to Yahtzees overseas, but not help kids. Yeah. Like, best system in the world, right? Impoverish our own children while killing children overseas with the money we extract from our children. We're super smart. 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 Oh, you guys want to talk about the Holodomor? Okay, look, this is the only thing that I'll actually say about the Holodomor, okay? When Netanyahu commits the genocide in Gaza, he does so openly. He has statements. He says things, right? It's impossible to organize a genocide secretively. There's no such thing as a super secret hidden genocide. It doesn't exist. It can't exist. It must be the case that it is heavily organized. So you need to see people talking about it, right? You have to see people talking about it. So that's why when Netanyahu organizes his genocide in Gaza, he talks about it and it's very open. It's why all the ministers talked about it and it's very open. It's why when Adolf Hitler organized the Holocaust, it was open. They voted on it in their parliament. He was very outspoken about it. He wrote about it in Mein Kampf. When the Americans committed a genocide against the First Nations people, they voted on it in their Congress. It was very open. It was discussed openly. When Canada did the reservation system here in Canada, we voted on it. It was very open. It was obvious to see. Find me one Soviet bureaucrat from Stalin to the very bottom. Find me one Soviet bureaucrat even talking about an intentional famine. Find me And even better than that, find me any opposition, any Ukrainian opposition talking about an intentional famine being put on them. And guess what? You can't. Why? Because the Soviets literally were talking about stopping the famine. That's what their interest was, and it's really obvious that that's what they were doing. That they got hit by a famine in a famine-stricken region that had happened throughout the Tsarist period, and incidentally, they resolved it, and a famine has never happened there again. So it looks to me, if you actually look at the historical record, what actually happened is famine, 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 famine. Soviets experienced one famine and then never again. So they solved the problem, is what happened. And you can't find a quote from one single Soviet bureaucrat anywhere talking about causing an intentional famine. You can find Stalin literally saying we have to put in all of the resources possible to prevent this famine from happening and to alleviate this famine as it's happening. You can find no Ukrainian resistance to the idea that there is an intentional famine occurring. And then moreover, the second largest cohort to fight with Stalin in World War II are the Ukrainians. The narrative doesn't make any goddamn sense at all. And the only reason you believe it is because you're believing known liars who lie to you constantly. Oh, the CIA lied to you about the weapons of mass destruction. Oh, the State Department is lying about its intentions right now in front of you. They're lying about the Ukrainian war. They lie about literally everything, but they're for sure telling you the truth about this. They're for sure telling you the truth about communism, right? Their primary advocate, right? They're for sure going to do that. What are you, nuts? What are you, crazy? You just believe them on the face of it with no evidence. Okay, bud. Okay. Felis Beatty, could you please sing the national anthem of Canada? Probably not, bro. Oh, Canada. There you go, bud. Our home and native land. Brutal. Like, yeah, that's exactly what the Holodomor is intended to be. It's Holocaust envy, right? It's a way for Nazis to pretend as though communists are just as bad as they are. Right? Like, and they're not. Haley asks, are they ever going to elaborate what heinous acts were perpetuated against the victims by communism? Yeah, they had the temerity to shoot back. That's the problem. Right? That's the problem. That they had the temerity to shoot back. Like that's the whole complaint about literally every critic of the Middle East, every critic of every rebellion ever throughout history is that they have the temerity to shoot back. Right? It's why the line is, do you condemn Hamas for what they did on October 7th? Do you condemn Hamas for what they did on October 7th? Like, you might as well be saying, do you condemn Luke Skywalker for blowing up the Death Star? Like, do you condemn a people in the midst of a genocide fighting back against their oppressors? That's what that question is actually saying. Like, it's pretty embarrassing, right? It's a pretty embarrassing question, frankly, because it's obviously being asked by imperialists to make sure that everybody's in on the imperial line and to shame people into going along with imperialists. You condone hummus? Man, I could go for some hummus right now, I tell you what. Where am I moving here? Oh, yeah. From the Toronto Star, it's just an overall explosion in homelessness. Encampment numbers in Toronto have more than doubled over last March. A snapshot of tents and structures in Toronto is trending closer to pandemic spring numbers, according to City Hall data. This is a great opportunity. I got to get a lot better at doing this. Please like, share, and subscribe. hit the bells, hit the whistles. Consider donating to my Patreon. It's the best place to donate to. If you donate even $1, it gets you into my Discord where you can continue the fun. More importantly than that, right, while donating a little bit would be really wonderful, more important than that, tell people I exist. Let people know. Let people know. This is written by Victoria Gibson, affordable housing reporter. It was the tents at Roundtree Mills Park that caught the eye of veteran Toronto outreach worker Diana Chan McNally. She'd never seen an encampment here, by the banks of the Humber River, north of Finch. Yet, as of mid-March, at least 3 tents were erected in this riverside green space, deep in northwest Toronto. To Chan McNally, it's yet another symptom of a ballooning crisis. As city data shows, the number of tents in ravines, parks, and under bridges is more than double last spring's count. Where workers counted 82 tents or other makeshift structures set up citywide on March 15, 2023, that shot up to 202 on the same date this year, edging closer to the 291 tent count seen in the mid-pandemic spring of 2021. Some of the growth comes from more concentrated downtown locations, such as the massive tents at Clarence Square Park, but smaller camps have also arisen in further flung corners, such as Milliken Park in Scarborough and in the parklands along the West End Humber River. It's a situation that points to ever-rising desperation, advocates and city officials say, and the urgency of creating affordable homes as a way to reverse course. It's just an overall explosion in homelessness, Chan McNally said. See how even when they're talking about the worst outcomes, homelessness, they refuse to acknowledge that we have a shit ton of empty properties, Airbnbs, that we have a bunch of investors that are just sitting, squatting on properties that are empty. They just refuse to talk about it. Because the obvious solution is to take those empty properties and put people in them. And to stop pretending like they don't exist. And they're funneling all of this energy into the dead end of just build more houses. Because it sounds like a good idea, but guess who's going to buy those houses? It's not going to be these homeless people, right? It's not going to be these homeless people. Who's it going to be? Who's going to buy all these houses that we're going to build, right? So they're going to tax a bunch of people. They're going to tax you. They're going to tax you, right? So that they pull up a bunch of money and they're going to build a bunch of houses. And then who's going to buy those houses? Oh, investors. And what's going to happen? They're going to sit empty. Not a solution. Why have numbers risen? Duh. To understand why camps have grown, Greg Cook, another longtime outreach worker, says it's as simple as looking at the numbers. A rising number of people are losing the roofs over their heads, with 1,056 people entering shelters in February versus 864 who moved out. An average of 158 people each day that month called to find a bed but were turned away. It's a similar story month after month, Cook noted, as climbing rents make it harder for people to find and keep their housing, and mounting demand for shelters means they're often packed. To him, it was no surprise that Toronto encampments have more than doubled, and he cautioned the city's count may not fully capture the scope as some tents are more hidden. Yeah, that's the smart people. The smart people keep it hidden so that the fascists don't come and kick the shit out of them. The data provided to the Star appears to have some blind spots. For example, it shows 0 tents on any of the 4 dates at an often densely packed location beside the Church of St. Stephen in the Fields in Kensington Market, nor at any at Sanctuary Toronto near Yonge and Bloor Streets, where Cook works and says tents would have certainly been. Gord Tanner, City Hall's head of homelessness initiatives, says the data is limited as it captures a single point in time, while encampments ebb and flow. Certainly, we've had activity at those locations over the course of the years that we're talking about, but even with those limitations, the City Hall data makes clear the numbers are growing. And Tanner expects that to continue as the weather warms, with camps typically growing in the summer. Last year, the counts rose from 82 tents in mid-March to nearly 200 by mid-May. Chan McNally noted that there may be time-specific factors affecting this spring's data, noting the March snapshot corresponds with changes such as the closure of a temporary 300-person respite at the Better Living Center, while some occupants likely transitioned to other sites. She said it's also likely some people have set up camp somewhere instead. You have to factor in the closure of a couple of spaces, she said, while pointing to the sheer force of demand from longtime Torontonians who'd lost their homes and new refugees alike. There's also this ongoing process of more and more people falling into homelessness. So literally, while homelessness is rising, we're shutting down locations. We're shutting shelters down. Yeah, we're not fascists. We're not fascists at all. More tents spread further apart. While the number of tents and makeshift structures citywide has risen closer to numbers seen mid-pandemic, the 2024 data shows there has not been a return to the scale of camps seen in previous springs, with the largest camp this year being Clarence Square Park at Wellington Street and Spadina Avenue, which had 23 tents or structures as of March 15th, versus the 56 at Alexandra Park in spring 2021, or the 37 in Allen Gardens on March 15th, 2023, where the pandemic saw a number of sizable camps citywide in locations such as Trinity Bellwoods and Lamport Stadium in the city's West End. The second largest site as of this spring was the 13 structures counted at Cherry Beach's Clark Park Beach Park, followed by 12 structures that remained in place at Allen Gardens. Yeah, people don't want to congregate in big numbers anywhere because then the cops will come and beat the shit out of them, right? So if you walk into a park and you see like 20 tents, you're not going to put your tent there because it's likely the cops are going to come and beat the shit out of you and clear you out, right? You want to be by yourself. You don't want groups of people, right? Like you want to make sure that you're somewhat isolated so that the cops won't spend the resources to clear you out. You don't want to be part of a big encampment because that's how you get a fucking billy club in the back of your head. Instead, camps have spread further across the map, with 3 times as many locations with tents this spring compared to last. To Chan McNally, this trend may reflect people trying to avoid being hassled or told to move, particularly as some people have expressed frustration or annoyance at homelessness in public spaces, such as the TTC. They're trying to actively be invisible in public spaces. The drop at Allen Gardens, Chan McNally noted, has corresponded with a heightened City Hall effort to try to move occupants into housing, with concentrated resources and housing aid directed towards the particular park, while security has also been deployed to prevent new tents from popping up. She was glad to see a number of people secure housing in that process, though she worries about supports being limited to those already in place. Tanner said focus on existing occupants was a tough decision, made as affordable homes and resources such as rent subsidies are in too short supply, with market prices rising and income supports still prohibitively low. This is a challenge we have in the delivery of shelter beds and scarce housing resources, he said, noting that Allen Gardens was prioritized due to its size, and their approach was to focus on those who'd been encamped the longest. What happens now? I mean, obviously we send cops at these people, right? That's what's actually going to happen. But let's listen to the propaganda. Tanner says City Hall is placing a trailer at Clarence Square to create a more permanent presence for city workers so that they can call the cops in, whether street outreach teams or security, right? To try to emulate the Allen Garden strategy. It's an approach he hopes to see City Hall formally endorse, as staff intend to present a revamped encampment strategy to Toronto's Economic and Community Development Committee later this month and to Council in May. So what you're seeing is you're seeing a strategy that justifies the strategists, right? We give a lot of money to somebody to deal with homelessness, and then they embark towards a strategy that doesn't solve homelessness so that they can keep their job. Right? Because if they actually eliminated homelessness, and how would you eliminate homelessness? You'd take the people who don't have houses and you put them into houses, right? But if you did that, you'd be out of a job, right? So this is what they do. They have their dumb bullshit strategies and their ridiculous ideas, right? To maintain the system of homelessness, to manage the system of homelessness. They're not interested in solving the problem. They're not interested in looking at their capitalist overlords and being like, hey, you have 10,000 empty houses. We're putting some people in there. Tough shit. They're not interested in that. They're interested in maintaining their cushy job where they get to feel good about themselves. Or, yeah, I'm helping the homelessness by keeping them homeless. But boy, howdy, do we have a permanent place here so that we can call cops to come beat the shit out of them when we need to. That's helpful. We're helping them. Take these people and put them in houses and tell your capitalist overlords to get fucked. The document, which Tanner says will respond to recommendations made by Toronto's ombudsman in response to past encampment clearings, will include an updated protocol city staff can refer to. Cook, the outreach worker, fears the varying departments involved in the city's encampment response, from parks to transportation staff, may still result in an uneven approach. As the summer nears, he hopes to see officials focus on the bigger picture, with governments at all levels showing increased urgency around creating affordable homes, right? It's not about using the empty houses we have, hoarded by capitalists, right? That's not what it's about, right? It's about building more homes. Quick, homelessness problem. Build more homes for the owners to buy and withhold from you, so that we'll have more empty houses, right? Toronto needs to stop taking a reactionary approach to the growing crisis, he said. Correct. We need to take homeless people, put them in empty houses, and tell the capitalist owners, hey, go fuck yourself. Yep, invalid solutions to chaos and crisis sure are profitable. It's all going to keep happening, increasing in frequency and severity, I suspect. Yeah, we're a society of salesmen, right? So everything needs to be sold. You can't just do something that's actually going to work. You can't just solve the problem because there's no profit in it, right? There's no profit in solving the problem. No. The profit is in maintaining the problem and managing the problem. That's how you actually make money, because it's all a fucking grift. Fellas asks, do you think a red monarchy is possible? I don't know what that is, my man. What's a red monarchy? Methane writes, invalid solution. Oh, I already said that. I already said that. Yeah, Haley, do you think this affordable housing reporter has ever called for a complete landlording ban? Yeah. Or is it just a grift? Couldn't go to the landlords that are hoarding gigantic amounts of properties and tell them, hey, these empty properties that you're sitting on, we're going to put homeless people in there. Tough shit. Like, nah, we're not going to do that. We're not interested. We're not interested in that. Like, the system of capital is trying so hard to try to put like a nice, shiny, sunshiny story on this. Listen to this one. This is great. From CTV News. Many Canadians still feeling squeezed, even as debt worries ease. Insolvency firm. Some Canadians are feeling a little more optimistic about their debt with the prospects of interest rate cuts on the horizon, said MNP Limited. The insolvency firm's consumer debt index metric shows a significant rebound in the first quarter of 2024 after 12 months of low scores, according to its latest report. More than a quarter of Canadians say they perceive their current debt situation as better than a year ago, which sort of means that 75% of them say that they don't, but we're not going to report on that. That's fine. Fewer Canadian households than last quarter, at 41%, say they are concerned about their current level of debt. Things are not as bad as they were. That's the main theme of the latest report, MNP President Grant Bazan said in the release. But despite the uptick in consumer sentiment, Canadian households are still feeling the squeeze, he added, as more mortgage renewals loom and the cost of living continues to rise. Half is more than 25%. Half of respondents said they are concerned with what MNP calls a social squeeze, meaning they're worried about spending money on their lifestyle and on social obligations. Overwhelmed and discouraged by how expensive it is to attend or participate in social events, be it birthdays, weddings, graduations, or family celebrations, some may be sinking further into hardship because they simply can't afford to participate, said Bazan. Man, I wonder why the birth rate's down, eh? I wonder why people aren't having any kids. I wonder why there's this like epidemic of loneliness going on. It's so difficult to figure out. Fewer Canadians than ever before reported being concerned about their ability to repay their debts. But nearly half said they are 200 or less away from failing to meet all of their financial obligations. A number that didn't shift from the latest report. These guys just like cannot help themselves, right? The Bank of Canada looks set to start cutting its key interest rate late this year as inflation has significantly moderated from its highs. Just like, it's just like embarrassing. It's just embarrassing to watch these guys, right? Yeah, it's moderated, right? Inflation went like this, and then it went down, and then it went back up, and then it's gone down. So it's moderated, right? Because inflation went up and then moderated. Exploiting learned helplessness. In gambling, a person who consistently loses bets despite trying different strategies might eventually give up, believing that luck is entirely out of their control. The reason why democracy lacks hope. I mean, this whole thing's a fucking catastrophe, right? And we don't live in a democracy, right? Oh yeah, this is one Americans. Can we please have universal health care? U.S. government. Best I can do is jail scraper. New York City is planning to build the world's tallest prison. The slammer has been called jail scraper. The jail will hold 1,000 prisoners across a 40-floor tower. We're doing it, guys. We're doing Judge Dredd. We're gonna do it. And soon we'll get RoboCop up in here, right? We'll have Judge Dredd meets RoboCop. Right? It was all a documentary, right? It was all a gaze into the future. It was a prophecy, right? We were supposed to watch Judge Dredd and think that's the future of mankind. Yeah, if houses double in 2021 but wages go up 5% in 2023, the 2023 data alone looks pretty good. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's just this fucking chicanery. Judge Dredd meets RoboCop meets Terminator. Yeah, we're doing it. Hey, guys, we're doing it. We're doing Judge Dredd, right? We got the AI thing going on with robotics, so Terminator, right? So we're gonna have Judge Dredd with Terminators. We just need a nice wholesome story about a human brain being used as an engine in one of these robots, and we did it. We got RoboCop, right? We're here. We're isn't the future wonderful? Isn't the future so sunshiny and beautiful? Isn't it so great how the system of capital has manifested all of our like nightmares into reality? Isn't that cool? How we made all of these like nightmarish movies throughout the 80s and 90s, and the system of capital was like, those look awesome, we should do those. Instead of being like, this is a warning. Perhaps we should act more prudently and with wisdom. Nope. Oh, Terminator looks awesome. Let's do Terminator. From Michael Parenti's stash, you think everything's a CIA op. Revealed later, it was a CIA op. Well, obviously that was a CIA op, but you really think this time it's a CIA op? Revealed later, it was a CIA op. Well, obviously, repeat until the heat death of the universe. Feels like that's my whole channel, dude. It feels like that's my whole life. Just like, something happens and I immediately go, probably a CIA op, right? And everybody goes, bah, oh, he's just what a look. And then like 2 days later, I'm holding the paper in front of them. So in the midst of all of this declining reality that we find ourselves in, Canadian Forces wants to expand offensive cyber capability, briefing says. Boy, howdy, we're just not even pretending anymore, eh? We're just like not even pretending. We're just the Nazis. The Canadian Forces wants to expand its ability to launch cyber attacks and plans to conduct a series of related tests this year, military documents show. The military has developed its Cyber Force Vision 2035, a strategy involving its own personnel working closely with the electronic spies at the Communications Security Establishment in Ottawa, a 2023 briefing said. The Cyber Force would be equipped to conduct advanced defensive and offensive cyber activities. It would also reach, according to the briefing, an end state in which offensive cyber capabilities conducted with CSE are normalized and fully integrated into full-spectrum operations. The Canadian Armed Forces, or CAF, hopes that during 2024, capability trials are normalized for offensive cyber operations, the document added. National Defense has noted on its website that the authority for CAF to conduct offensive cyber operations is approved by the government on a mission-by-mission basis and in accordance with domestic and international law. Cybercrime is still considered the #1 online threat activity affecting Canadians, according to the federal government. But a more sophisticated and wider cyber attack could disrupt power and energy grids and threaten the delivery of essential services. National Defense Public Affairs officials stated in an email to this newspaper that the military and the department didn't discuss offensive cyber operations for security reasons. But the information contained in the briefing was present to the public on April 3rd, 2023, by Lieutenant Colonel Caleb de Boer of the Cyber Operations Force Development. The briefing was not classified, and any member of the public could attend in person or watch the presentation online for a $35 fee provided to a military association. The National Defense Public Affairs Branch did not explain why it falsely claimed offensive cyber operations weren't discussed for security reasons, but critics have pointed out that over the past year, the Canadian forces and the department have appeared to slide towards more secrecy, even as they advocate for billions of dollars in additional funding. If National Defense hopes to expand its cyber capabilities, it's going to need more funding, according to a March 9th, 2020 briefing for Peter Hammerschmidt, the department's Assistant Deputy Minister for Policy. Canada needs to devote significant resources pertaining to the development of its offensive and defensive cyber capabilities if it intends to be a sophisticated actor in cyberspace, noting the briefing obtained by this newspaper under the Access to Information law. Such a good idea putting all our money online, right? Such a great idea, putting all our money online and having all of our money attached. You know what we should do? We should take our most important systems and we should put them on the internet. That's a good idea, right? Yeah, why the hell would anyone want that? Yeah, good question. Good question. I think these people are psychos, dude. It's really clear. And more importantly, stupid psychos. Right? As the continued Ukraine conflict, we got from Business Insider, Russia's army is now 15% bigger than when it invaded Ukraine, says USM general. What the hell is NATO going to do, dude? What are they going to do? What are they even going to do? Right? They're going to do a bunch of bluster, and they keep doing it. They keep standing up and be like, we're going to fight against Russia. We're going to fight against the Ruskies. Yeah, but they don't have a military. They don't have an army. Nobody's joining the military. The United States and Europe both keep talking about how difficult it is to find recruits. Where are all these people going to come from? What are you going to do? Have a draft? Yeah, good luck with that. Russia's armed forces have grown larger and not dwindled since its war in Ukraine, a top U.S. general said on Wednesday. The army is actually now larger by 15% than it was when it invaded Ukraine, U.S. Army General Christopher Cavoli, NATO's Supreme Allied Commander Europe, told the House Armed Service Committee in a hearing. So NATO's Supreme Allied Commander Europe, which, what a bunch of loser dweebs these guys are. NATO's Supreme Allied Commander in Europe. Over the past year, Russia increased its frontline troop strength from 360,000 to 470,000, Cavoli continued, adding that the bolstered numbers stemmed from Russia raising its conscription age from 27 to 30. The increase, Cavoli said, meant that Russia was able to enlarge the pool of available military conscripts by 2 million for years to come. In sum, Russia is on track to command the largest military on the continent, Cavoli said in his opening statement to Congress. Regardless of the outcome of the war in Ukraine, Russia will be the larger, more lethal, and angrier than the West than when it invaded, he added. What a huge success this Ukrainian war has been for NATO, eh? They must be so glad that they poked that bear. They must be so glad that they couped the government in Ukraine. They must be so glad that they funded neo-Nazis to fight a war in the Donbass. They must be just over the moon and thrilled that they caused this situation for themselves. Instead of just being nice. Instead of just trading and just being normal. Representatives for Russia's defense ministry did not immediately respond to a request for comment from Business Insider sent outside regular business hours. What a bunch of assholes. Russia's defense ministry for sure wants to talk to its primary antagonist when we send them messages outside of regular business hours. What a bunch of losers. Cavoli isn't the first U.S. official to have highlighted the threat posed by a resurgent Russia. And this is all they can think about. They can't think about how, like, they're completely responsible for this, right? They can't admit that, like, yeah, you guys are a rising Nazi threat, and it's really obvious that you're a rising Nazi threat. It makes sense that Russia will want to defend itself from you guys, right? No, none of that, right? Russia's a threat. We need to continue arming ourselves. Last week, Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell said that Russia has almost completely restored its military after sustaining heavy losses in Ukraine. Its newfound capabilities pose a longer-term challenge to stability in Europe and threatens NATO allies, Campbell told attendees at a dialogue hosted by the Center for a New American Security, a Washington-based think tank, on April 3rd. Cavoli and Campbell's warnings of an invigorated Russian army come amidst waning U.S. support for the Ukraine war. Yeah, because we figured out what you guys did. Right? I was saying it right from the beginning, but I got banned off TikTok for it, and I got banned off of and they literally will demonetize your shit. RT got banned off all these platforms. Chris Hedges got banned. Lee Camp got banned. Right? And for what? For pointing out that you guys did a coup. Right, NATO did a coup in Ukraine in 2014. It created a war because you guys funded all the neo-Nazis, or the Azov Battalion and all this, which sent troops down to the Donbass region to go to war for 8 years and finally draw Putin into the conflict. And then you all pretended like, oh, history began the moment Putin invaded. Right? And my favorite part about it was when you guys had the Minsk Accords. You literally had Putin at the table to negotiate a peace deal. And then the leader of Germany outright said, yeah, we had no intention of abiding by that. That was all bullshit. We were just doing that so that we could arm the Ukrainians more. Like, NATO is such a fraudulent group of obvious Nazis. And the Russians are literally defending themselves against that, like always. And for some reason, the dimwits amongst us are like, history began the moment Putin invaded and not 1 second earlier. Not 1 second earlier. How dare they shoot back? How dare they shoot back? Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said on Sunday that his country will lose this war without additional support from the United States. Good, get fucked. If we do not continue to support Ukraine, Ukraine will run out of artillery shells and will run out of air defense interceptors in fairly short order, Cavoli said on Wednesday. Based on my experience in 37 plus years in the U.S. military, if one side can shoot and the other side can't shoot, that side that can't shoot back loses. What an insight. I gotta read that one again. Cavoli said on Wednesday, this is the smartest thing, by the way, I've ever heard any United States general ever say. Based on my experience in 37 plus years in the U.S. military, if one side can shoot and the other side can't shoot, the side that can't shoot loses. He continued. I shouldn't say the smartest thing any general has said. Smiley Butler, when he wrote War is a Racket, was pretty smart. Dude, this quote is so brilliant. That's an inspirational poster quote there if I've ever seen it. Put this guy's face on a poster. I mean, based on my experience in 37 plus years in the U.S. military, if one side... you know what? I don't need that. Let's get rid of that thing. So his face, Cavoli's face, looking off to the side. If one side can shoot and the other side can't shoot back, the side that can't shoot back loses. General Cavoli. That's a real, like, it's deja vu all over again kind of thing. Yeah, Generation Y me. Yeah, absolutely. Just like, whoa, 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 what? Oh. Big shout out to Ronnie McNutt. Wherever you are, Ronnie, I'm still thinking of you, my man. I don't get a lot of that anymore, but that was the symbol that everybody was using. Ronnie, we carry on the torch. Like, the United States and NATO can't help themselves, I think. I think that they are, I think that the people who are supporting this and who are actually doing this are completely unhinged. That they have lost the ability to be rational. I don't think they're capable of being rational. I think that they are completely running on hysteria and emotion. And their priorities are exclusively the veneration and worship of money. So they're hysterical death cultists pursuing the collection of their god while destroying everything around them. And they act as though the people who are defending themselves against this hysteria, well, those are the real criminals. Yeah, well, Russia's building a big army there. That's very threatening to the death cult. Right? Like, and the entire rest of the world sees it. Like, the entire rest of the world completely sees it. Like, it's so naked. It's so obvious. It's so directly in front of your face. Like, Iona Belarra, the Spanish Minister for Social Rights, says Israel is competing with Nazism for first place in the League of Horror in the history of mankind. That's coming out of Spain, right? That's the Minister for Social Rights coming out of Spain. We've got Australia. Australia is considering recognizing the Palestinian state. We've got China. China supports full UN membership for Palestine. We've got the entire rest of the world completely turning against America because its lies are getting obvious. Here we've got a great video, right? They want you to believe it all started October 7th. Well, on October 6th, here's an article from Reuters. Palestinian killed during settler assault on West Bank town on October 6th. If we continue the video. My son was killed on October 6th. There was no Hamas. An article from Al Jazeera. This is a great video. That's a compilation. From Al Jazeera, Israelis kill 4 Palestinians in occupied West Bank confrontation. Published October 3rd. Gaza Strip protesters received bullet wounds to ankles, medics report. Published October 4th. I think that's October 4th. It's too small. Before October 7th. Yeah, but history started October 7th. On September 6th, on the 19th of September, Israeli forces shot and killed a Palestinian man during a demonstration near Israel's perimeter fence around the Gaza Strip, east of Khan Yunis. But history began October 7th, right? So we don't remember all the rest of this. We don't remember that it was an open-air concentration camp and that they were actively sniping people. West Bank, spike in Israeli killings of Palestinian children. That's August 28th. So there was a spike in Israeli killing of children on the 28th of August. But history began October 7th, so we don't need to worry about this, right? Right? 2023 becomes the deadliest year for Palestinians in the West Bank as Israeli military launches fresh attack on Jenin. That's the 3rd of July, 2023. Like, on the 18th of September, 2023 marks deadliest year on record for children in occupied West Bank. But that's before October 7th. That's the beginning of history, October 7th, right? Do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn Hamas? I'm speaking of Canada being antithetical to everything communism at least should stand for. Yeah. Like, we venerate Nazis around here, my man. Like, yeah. Like, we're not a serious people. Like, what? Oh, Steve asking the big questions. What do you think of Jesus Christ? I want each and every single one of you to reach into your wallet and pull $1 out and send it to the address below for your love of Jesus Christ. I mean, I think Jesus Christ is pretty cool. I think the Christians hate him. Like, the story of Christ is a very powerful and important story, and it's a story that continues to resonate throughout existence. It's why the Christians are doing everything they can to kill their Christ, because who they despise, by the way. Christians almost universally, I'd say 95% of them, really despise Christ and everything he stood for. They hate his message. They hate his acts. They hate what he did. They despise his policies of poverty alleviation. They despise his messages about towards the poor. They despise what he said about rich people. They despise who he helped and who he hung out with. They despise everything about him. And so the irony that they still call themselves Christians while having this overwhelming loathing of their Christ is pretty remarkable, frankly. It's pretty remarkable. Like, any actual Christian that actually calls themselves a Christian would be demanding that there be massive poverty alleviation systems. The pathetic, small-minded, fascist justifications to keep people poor that Christians use, where it's, well, it should be a personal choice based on You think your Christ gives a shit about that? You genuinely think that Jesus Christ would walk up to a machine that you could pull some levers and it would alleviate poverty and be like, I don't think so. It's supposed to be a person's personal choice to alleviate poverty. We shouldn't use this poverty alleviation machine. Like, then your Christ is a moron, right? Like, they keep trying to reduce the power and the scope and the scale of their Christ, and they keep trying to find reasons. And the answer is because they despise him. They despise Jesus Christ. The people who walk around being like, praise Jesus, I love Jesus with all my heart, hate him. I've never seen anybody hate Christ more than Christians, right? They refuse to alleviate poverty. They refuse to alleviate homelessness. They refuse to speak out against the injustice of the state. They refuse to speak out against the injustices of the police. They refuse to actually do anything that their Christ demands that they do. And instead make up as many excuses as they possibly can so that they can fucking hate trans people and hate gay people and hate blacks and hate Hispanics and hate Muslims and hate Jews. Right? These people are dark, bleak, self-entitled, narcissistic psychopaths who are only holding up an image of Christ so that they can all look at one another and be like, oh, we're all in the same kooky, weird little cult where we pretend to love Jesus but actually despise the shit out of him. I've never seen anybody hate Christ more than Christians. And that's going to continue. Ukraine is droning a nuclear plant. Yeah, that's a thing that I've been seeing going along. I haven't seen like a really significant report on it though. I mean, it'd be suicidal, like, and dumb. Like, it'd be one of the dumbest things that a people could do. But Ukraine's a pretty dumb place. Like, they're doing everything they can to destroy themselves, and have been doing everything they can to destroy themselves for a long time now. Like, it's just wild to watch what the populace is doing in Ukraine. And like a sane, rational thinking people would be like, they would have got ahead of this like in 2010, but I think they're caught up in a hysteria. And they're like venerating Stepan Bandera, and like huge sections of the populace are just like, yeah, the Nazis, collaborators of our history. Those are the people we should be naming streets after for sure. Like they've just become completely unhinged. So June, just random David Lynch statement. Oh, the today's number. I remember the number draw with David Lynch. Yeah, he stopped doing it. Oh, that was a lot of fun. There's a little part of me that sort of thinks maybe I should do it. Just do a number draw again. Those were the old days. Those were the good old days. Those were the good old days. The year goes by. Ukraine is going to win because Europe remembers the USSR. Yeah, that's like some cope porn right there, dude. Like, for real. Like, that's just like the Ukrainians will win because they have a spirit. They hold in the spirit of their heart. They're just, yeah, you know what actually wins war? Men. That's what wins wars. You know who has men? Russia. You know who doesn't have men? Ukraine. Like, literally, Vladimir Zelensky is standing in front of the world being like, if we don't get major support, we're going to lose this thing. And guess what? They're not going to get that major support. And if they do get the major support, like, it's just like... it's just going to be embarrassing to watch. The Nuclear Power Safety Agency in Europe has been there and seen them do the attack. And we're like, stop, please? Okay, that's serious. I should be able to find something on that. Nuclear Power Safety Agency attack nuclear power plant Ukraine. Right? I should be able to find something from that. Oh, yeah. Great. 10 hours ago. Perfect. IAEA chief says Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant attacks risk dangerous shift in Ukraine war. Oh, man. What a great way to close this one out. Generation Y Me, thank you for your service. Drone attacks on the Russian-held Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in Ukraine must stop, as they could pose a new and gravely dangerous stage in the war, the UN nuclear watchdog chief told his agency's 35-nation board of governors on Thursday. Drones attacked Zaporizhzhia, Europe's biggest nuclear power plant, on Sunday, hitting a reactor building in the worst such incident since November 2022. Though nuclear safety was not compromised, the International Atomic Energy Agency has said. Moscow and Kiev have repeatedly accused one another of targeting the plant since Russia seized it weeks after it invaded Ukraine. Both countries requested an emergency meeting of the IAEA's board soon after Sunday's attack. The most recent attacks have shifted us into an acutely consequential juncture in this war, IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi told the board gathering. He called on the board to unanimously support the role of IAEA in monitoring principles aimed at preventing an accident at the plant, including that it not be attacked. Since no draft resolutions have been submitted to the board meeting, it is likely to boil down to an exchange of statements by the countries convening behind closed doors in Vienna. We are meeting today, and I will meet with the UN Security Council next week, because it is of paramount importance to ensure these reckless attacks do not mark the beginning of a new and gravely dangerous front of the war, Grossi said, adding, strikes must cease. This is just so stupid, eh? Like, we're just so dumb. Like, it's just stupidity wrapped up in a burrito of dumbness. We're not intelligent. Right? We're not intelligent. Greetings. Where did I study economics? Books. Did you know that there are all these books that you can just read? Right? And as soon as you lose faith in the fundamentalist neoliberals who call themselves economists, and you actually read these texts, you realize how hacky and fraudulent they are, right? It's like how Protestantism arose because people actually read the Bible, and they were like, oh, the Catholics are frauds, right? That's exactly what's happening now. You can just read Smith, right? Did you know that? You can just go read The Wealth of Nations, and you can read it and be like, oh, these guys are frauds. Like, when they talk about the invisible hand of the free market, right? They go, Adam Smith told us of the invisible hand of the free market, which will come through, and through the magical invisible hand of the free market will restructure capitalism for the best of everybody. The only time Smith ever said the invisible hand of the free market. The only reason Smith, like what are you talking about? Who wrote them? Poor people? What are you talking about? Adam Smith. Adam Smith. Are you here? Right? Are you listening? Adam Smith, the only time he actually said the invisible hand of the free market was in reference to its destructive capability. That he said that if we allow capitalism to operate in a free market, it will destroy the place as if by an invisible hand. Right? So these guys are frauds. They're complete and total frauds. They're just like the Christians with their Bible. They've never read it. They don't know anything about it. And if they do read it, it's just a cherry-picked bullshit so they can put it in front of you and say, like, yeah, it makes sense that you live in poverty. You know, the free market just says that poor people have to die. Yeah, it does. Yeah, that's a serious thing, yeah. And then you just read Marx, right? You read Marx, which all of these economists have not read. Richard Wolff is a Marxist economist that was trained in Harvard and Yale. He's currently like at the University, I think it's of Michigan or something like this. I can't remember exactly offhand. And he outright said that during his entire time, guy's got 2 PhDs in economics. He said in his entire education, he was never told to read Marx. These guys are illiterates. They're stupid. They're dumb. So what I'm saying is I know it all? No. I'm saying that I know more than people who know nothing and who profess to know things. Like, if you've never read a book in your life and someone's read a book, well, guess what? The invisible hand comes from the invisible belly, Aesop fable, does it? The belly and the members. Yeah, I remember when we had until 2030 to stop the climate apocalypse in 2020, and now we have until 2026. Yeah, dude, we're not stopping shit. Like, I don't want to be a doom and gloomer, and I don't want to get people down. Like, I don't want to spread depression or anything, but like, we're not stopping shit. Like, chugga, 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 chugga. We're going to plow into it face first, man. Like, as hard as possible. We're not doing fucking shit. Like, we're not going to stop this thing. What are you talking about? Like, and the politicians and the political class don't give a fuck. The fossil fuel industry doesn't give a fuck, right? They want fast cars, Bugattis, jets. They want to get into space and start exploring space. Like, they don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a fuck about the millions, if not billions, of people they're going to kill. They don't care. None of it matters to them, right? These people are psychopaths. They are like dark, bleak psychos. Just ridiculous. We got a guy who went to university for economics, so you got indoctrinated into the cult, right? Neoliberal economics, that's really working out. I remember when we had, yeah. This credentialism is really fun. It's really fun that a bunch of people, like a bunch of illiterate rubes who went and got a piece of paper from an institution designed to spread around a religious ideology, right? But you don't have a degree from a death cult. I've got a degree from a death cult, and I think that we should destroy the poor. All the science says that that's what we have to do. Yeah, more money for us, right? And that's economics, baby. Western economics, man. What an embarrassment. What a total disaster. Like, you're not going to convince me that the system, that the economists in the system of Western capital are worth a good goddamn at all, while they actively collapse the system around us. Like, they worship money. They treat it like it's a real thing. Like, it's gotten so bad that we have like Princeton professors writing articles repudiating their own reputation. Angus Deaton, a Nobel Prize winner, just recently wrote an article where he used phrases like economics is a license for plunder. Like, get the fuck out of here with this shit. Like, you're following a kooky, weird little religious ideology taught to you by kooky, weird little cultists, all surrounding an ideology of extracting as much wealth out of people as possible and then abandoning them. That's what your kooky, weird little religious ideology has to say about what economics is in the society. It's a death cult. It's a fucking death cult. And guess what? It's really fucking obvious. It's really fucking obvious. I've talked to lots of fundamentalists in my life. I've talked to Christian fundamentalists. I've talked to Islamic fundamentalists. And every single time I end up talking to somebody with an economics degree from one of these hacky institutions who give pieces of paper to people as long as they say, capitalism's good. It makes sense while we do war, genocide, death, spread plagues throughout the planet, and now we're going through a climate change apocalypse. Capitalism's the greatest. No, we're not going to read any critics. Nope, never read Marx, don't know anything about Marxism. I just believe what I'm told by these hacky losers who want more money from their donors, right? You're a fundamentalist. You're as bad as a Christian fundamentalist. You should not be trusted. You are worse than educated. You understand? You're a person who received an education. You got a piece of paper, so you think you know something, when you're not. You're just a kooky, weird little fundamentalist. I don't give a shit what you say. I don't care what you think. You might as well have gotten a degree in Bible studies for fucking PragerU for all I give a shit. Get fucked. Economics, the most evil of the social scientists, which is saying something because sociology and anthropology have been crazy, like wild. Yeah. Well, the goal of modern economics is to extract wealth from others. It's exploitive by its very nature, right? Economics departments of the past justify slavery. Economics departments of the past justify the system of wage slavery, the system of capital, right? They exist in order to create an ideology surrounding capitalism in order to get people convinced that their exploitation is normal. That's what economists actually do. And it's disgusting and it's disgraceful. And the most ridiculous are the ones who think they're doing good while they're doing this. Like, it's just clownish. Yeah, economics done right is like a science of math, but to do it right, you have to admit capitalism is really bad math. Yeah. Because if you actually admitted what the system of capital looked like, that there's an ownership class that owns all of the wealth, and a poor, impoverished class that has to sell themselves to that ownership class, if you actually start talking about it in that manner, well, then you become a Marxist, right? Because you're starting to engage in reality. But economists don't do that. Economists don't talk about the ownership class. And if they do, they use these flowery terms and talk about it like, oh, it's just natural and normal. Like, what a fucking ridiculous clown show. Bro proudly hanging the Soviet flag is insane. Yeah, I mean, I support organizations that work and actually fight for the people, right? Like, I actually have, like, a really beautiful chart right here. Like, the living standard in the Soviet Union tripled. Like, the life expectancy from birth in Russia from 1845 to 2020, right? So it's at 30. So if you're living in Russia, 1845, all the way to like 1915, right? It's about 30. So you hit the age of 30, you die in Russia because you're a serf, right? And you're being worked to death by SARS. The revolution happens, right? And there's spikes, goes like this. Hey, Nazis invade, right? So it plummets. And then after the Nazis get defeated by the Soviets, it goes, and it settles at 70. Big failure. Yeah, communism doesn't work. Yeah, doesn't work at all. Certainly not an effective thing that definitely helped the citizens of Russia. Modern day Russia is built upon the Stalinist era. Modern day Russia has the Soviets to thank. It was the Soviets that gave them a universal healthcare system, which they currently have. It was the Soviets that set the standard of life that the current modern day Soviets actually enjoy. Since the Stalinist era, life expectancy has actually declined, with a recent bump up as of 2005. So, like, what's your gripe? Let me guess, you support Russia over Ukraine right now. Yeah, I mean, that's not even a communist thing. That's literally like the United States supported a coup in Ukraine in 2014. Meanwhile, the Russians are screaming at the top of their lungs that Ukraine is a red line. We've got this document from the Russian ambassador, who is now the current head director, William Burns, the current director of the CIA. And he said in 2008, if we antagonize the Russians in Ukraine, they will go to war over it. And it's for the most obvious of reasons, right? Like, Russia has no reason to trust NATO. NATO's a warlike organization that has done wars of aggression. through its history, Libya being a big one. And it's very believable from the Russian perspective that NATO would use an inclusion of Ukraine into its membership as a platform to go to war against Russia. And so they said straight up, no, Ukrainian membership is off the table. We will go to war about it. And so what was the response from NATO? They couped Ukraine in 2014. They funded a bunch of neo-Nazis, including the Azov Battalion, to go to war in the Donbass, or the Donbass region. They literally confessed that all their peace negotiations were bullshit so that they could arm the Ukrainians, right? And so finally, Putin, after being so objectively betrayed in peace negotiations, went to war. So the complaint from NATO stands is that Russia fought back. That's the complaint. Name one country where communism worked. Communism has worked in every single country it's been tried. I literally just told how communism increased the life expectancy. I literally have a chart on my YouTube channel that I'm looking at right now. Communism increased the life expectancy in Russia by like a factor of 2.5. Like it's an incredible increase. All right, guys, I've reached the end of this one. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.